There's a moment, usually when you're not trying to achieve anything at all, when you catch a glimpse of something your soul has always known but your mind keeps forgetting. You are already complete. It might happen while you're washing dishes and sunlight catches the soap bubbles, or when you're walking somewhere ordinary and suddenly feel held by the simple fact of your own breathing. In that instant, the relentless voice that catalogues your inadequacies goes quiet, and what remains is the radical, almost impossible truth that you don't need to earn your place here. You don't have to improve yourself to deserve the air you breathe or the space you occupy. You don't need to accomplish more to justify the resources you consume or the love you receive. Your existence is not a debt requiring payment through achievement, perfection, or endless self-optimization. You're not a project awaiting completion, a problem demanding solution, or a rough draft of the person you're supposed to become. This truth lives in your body before your mind learns to question it. Watch a baby exist without apology, without agenda, without the slightest concern about whether they're doing life correctly. They cry when they need something, sleep when they're tired, smile when something delights them. They don't earn their caregiver's attention through good behaviour, or lose their worth through difficult moments. They simply are, and their being is enough to call forth love, protection, and tenderness from the world around them. Somewhere along the way you learn to make your worth conditional. Perhaps it was the praise that came only after achievements, the love that felt tied to being good, the attention that required performance. Perhaps it was the subtle message that your natural self wasn't quite right, that you needed improvement, upgrading, fixing. Perhaps it was the endless comparisons that taught you to measure your value against external standards that had nothing to do with your actual nature. But conditional worth is not worth at all. It's a transaction disguised as acceptance, a contract masquerading as love. Real worth is unconditional because it exists prior to anything you do or don't do, achieve or fail to achieve, become or refuse to become. It's woven into the fabric of your existence, as fundamental as your heartbeat, as essential as your breath. You are already enough, even on the days when everything feels difficult, when you can't find your footing, when you're not sure you're doing anything right. Enough is not a performance level to be reached, but a truth to be remembered. You were enough when you were learning to walk and falling down repeatedly. You were enough during the years you spent figuring out who you were and making mistakes along the way. You are enough now in whatever state of completion or confusion you currently inhabit. This doesn't mean you can't grow, change, or develop new capacities. It means your worth doesn't depend on that growth. It means the love you deserve isn't waiting for you to become better, and the respect you merit isn't contingent on your achievements. It means you can pursue goals from overflow rather than inadequacy, from curiosity rather than compulsion, from the joy of becoming rather than the fear of not being enough. Your worth is not up for debate. It's not a question requiring evidence, a hypothesis needing proof, or a conclusion waiting for sufficient data. It exists independent of others' opinions, beyond the reach of criticism, outside the influence of success or failure. No one can take it from you because no one gave it to you. It came with you, built into the very fact of your existence. You don't have to earn your right to exist. You don't need to justify your presence through productivity, validate your life through achievement, or prove your value through comparison with others. Your existence itself is the only credential you need, the only qualification that matters, the only proof required that you belong here. Being sensitive is not a flaw requiring correction, but a capacity for rich experience. Your depth of feeling allows you to perceive subtleties others miss, to respond to beauty that might go unnoticed, to offer empathy that can heal wounds you didn't create. The world needs people who feel deeply, who notice what others overlook, who can translate their inner experience into art, compassion, and understanding. You're allowed to rest without earning it through exhaustion. Sleep is not a reward for productivity, but a biological necessity, like breathing or eating. Your body needs restoration not because you've worked hard enough to deserve it, but because you're alive and aliveness requires renewal. Rest is not laziness, it's maintenance. It's how you honour the system that carries you through your days. You don't need to be extraordinary to matter. The ordinary magic of your daily presence, the way you make coffee, the kindness you show to strangers, the specific way you see the world, contributes to the web of existence in ways you may never fully understand. Your regular, unremarkable Tuesday has value not because anything special happens, but because you are there to experience it, to witness it, to be part of the ongoing creation of the world. You're not too much. Your intensity, your emotions, your needs, your way of being in the world are not excessive. They're exactly what they are. The right people for your life won't find you overwhelming. They'll find you appropriately complex for the depth of relationship you're capable of creating. Your particular way of being much is needed somewhere, by someone, in ways that being less would never accomplish. You're not enough either. You don't need more confidence, more skills, more anything to be worthy of good things happening to you. You don't need to accumulate qualifications to deserve love, gather achievements to merit respect, or develop additional capacities to earn your place. What you have, who you are, how you show up right now, is sufficient for the life that's available to you in this moment. Your being is more important than your doing. What you accomplish in your lifetime matters, but it matters less than the fact that you are here to accomplish it. Your presence changes things in ways that have nothing to do with your productivity. The way you listen, the kindness you offer, the particular perspective you bring to situations, the specific quality of attention you give to people and experiences. These invisible contributions shape the world in ways that measurable achievements never could. It's okay to be unfinished. You are not a sculpture requiring completion, a book needing an ending, or a project with a deadline. You are a living being in process, always becoming, always growing, always discovering new aspects of what it means to be you. The areas where you're still developing are not evidence of failure, but signs of aliveness, proof that you're still engaged with the beautiful, endless work of becoming human. The forgetting happens so gradually you don't notice it occurring. One day you wake up and realize you've been carrying a weight that was never yours to bear. The weight of proving your worthiness over and over again, of justifying your existence through achievement, of earning what was already freely given. You've been living as if your value were a question mark requiring an answer rather than a period ending the sentence of doubt. But your nervous system remembers what your mind forgets. In moments of deep rest, when the performing stops and the trying ceases, something in you recognizes its own inherent okayness. Your shoulders drop, your breathing deepens, the chronic tension of inadequacy releases, and what remains feels surprisingly familiar, like coming home to a place you never actually left. This remembering doesn't require anything from you except the willingness to stop working so hard against it. You don't need to convince yourself of your worth through affirmations or build your self-esteem through accomplishments. You need only to notice what's already true beneath the layers of conditioning that taught you to question it. The culture you live in profits from your forgetting. It sells you solutions to problems you don't actually have, improvements for a self that was never broken, upgrades for a system that was already complete. It teaches you to see yourself as a collection of deficits requiring correction, rather than as a whole being capable of growth and change without ceasing to be fundamentally acceptable. But you're not a collection of problems awaiting solutions. You're not a rough draft requiring editing, a prototype needing improvement, or a work in progress that will someday reach completion. You're a dynamic being, always changing and growing, but your worth remains constant throughout all the changes, anchoring you through every transformation. When you were 5 years old, running through a sprinkler on a summer day, you didn't question whether you deserved the joy you felt. When you were 8, absorbed in creating something with your hands, you didn't wonder if you were good enough to deserve the satisfaction of making. When you were 12, laughing with friends until your stomach hurt, you didn't pause to evaluate whether you'd earned the right to that happiness. The capacity for unself-conscious joy, for absorption in the moment, for feeling worthy of good experiences without first proving your adequacy, this lives in you still. It gets buried under years of messaging about what you need to do, be, have, or become to matter, but it doesn't disappear. It waits beneath the surface like spring waiting beneath winter, ready to emerge when conditions allow. You don't have to fix everything about yourself to be lovable. The people who love you most deeply love you not in spite of your flaws, but including them, not despite your struggles, but through them. Not when you're perfect, but especially when you're perfectly imperfect. Your quirks, your sensitivities, your particular way of moving through the world, these aren't obstacles to love, but invitations to it. The love you've received throughout your life came to you not because you earned it, but because something in you called it forth. Your fundamental lovability has nothing to do with your performance and everything to do with your essence. Even when you were difficult, confused, making mistakes, or struggling with things that seemed easy for others, the love that mattered most saw through all of that to something essential and unchanging. You're allowed to take up space without apologizing for it. Your presence is not an inconvenience requiring justification. Your needs are not burdens demanding validation. Your way of being in the world is not a problem needing correction. You belong here not because you've proven your right to exist, but because existence itself chose to express itself through the unique form of your life. The earth doesn't question whether it deserves the sun's warmth. The ocean doesn't wonder if it's worthy of the moon's influence. The trees don't earn their right to grow toward the light. They simply are, and their being calls forth what they need to thrive. Your being works the same way. It naturally attracts what serves your growth, your healing, your joy, not because you've done anything to deserve it, but because life supports life. Your struggles don't disqualify you from goodness. Your mistakes don't revoke your membership in the human family. Your difficult seasons don't cancel your worth. If anything, these experiences deepen your capacity for compassion, widen your understanding of what it means to be human, and connect you to the universal experience of facing challenges while trying to remain open to love. You don't need permission to rest deeply, to enjoy simple pleasures, to feel good about yourself for no particular reason. You don't need to earn these experiences through prior suffering, or justify them through future productivity. They're available to you simply because you're alive, because consciousness chose to express itself through your particular nervous system, because the universe somehow decided that your specific way of experiencing existence was necessary. The tiredness you feel sometimes isn't just physical exhaustion. It's the weariness that comes from constantly trying to prove what was never in question, from carrying a burden that was never yours, from solving a problem that doesn't actually exist. When you set down the weight of proving your worth, what remains is often a lightness you'd forgotten was possible. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning all goals and growth. It means approaching your development from a foundation of okayness rather than inadequacy, from curiosity rather than compulsion, from love rather than fear. When you know you're already enough, growth becomes an adventure rather than a requirement, change becomes play rather than work, and goals become expressions of your aliveness rather than attempts to earn your worthiness. Your enoughness is not diminished by your areas of growth. A tree doesn't become less worthy of sunlight when it's still growing toward its full height. A flower doesn't lose its beauty because it hasn't yet reached full bloom. Your incomplete places, your developing areas, your works in progress, these are evidence of your aliveness, not your inadequacy. The voice that tells you you're not enough speaks in the language of scarcity, competition, and fear. It sees the world as a place where worth must be earned, where value is limited, where someone else's adequacy threatens your own. But adequacy isn't scarce, it's infinite. There's enough worth to go around. Someone else being enough doesn't make you less enough. Someone else's adequacy doesn't diminish your own. You're enough for the life you're actually living, not the life you think you should be living. You're adequate for the challenges currently in front of you, not the challenges you imagine you should have conquered by now. You're sufficient for this moment, this breath, this opportunity to be conscious and alive in a universe that somehow arranged itself so that you could exist. This truth, that you are already enough, is not something you need to believe, achieve, or maintain. It's something you can remember when you forget. Return to when you wander, rest in when you're tired of trying to prove what was never in question. It's always here, waiting quietly beneath the noise of self-improvement and the anxiety of inadequacy, as patient as your heartbeat, as constant as your breath, as true today as it was the moment you arrived, and as true tomorrow as it will be when you finally understand that you never needed to earn what was always freely given. The aloneness you feel sometimes is one of the most convincing lies your mind can tell you, so seamless and complete that it feels like the truest thing you know about your existence. It whispers that you're the only one who struggles this way, the only one who carries this particular confusion, the only one awake at 3 a.m. wondering if anyone would notice if you simply disappeared. But even in your deepest isolation, even when the silence feels so complete it echoes, you're held by an invisible web of connection that spans continents and centuries. Right now, as you read these words, someone somewhere is feeling exactly what you feel. Someone is sitting in a different room, in a different city, perhaps on a different continent, carrying the same weight in their chest that you carry in yours. They're looking out a window wondering the same wondering, asking the same questions that keep you awake, longing for the same understanding that seems always just out of reach. This isn't coincidence. It's the profound interconnectedness of human experience, the way consciousness expresses the same fundamental needs through billions of individual hearts. You don't have to go through this by yourself. Whatever this is, the grief that feels too big for your body, the fear that wakes you before dawn, the confusion about who you're becoming or what you're supposed to do with your life, you don't have to carry it alone. The belief that you should be able to handle everything independently is one of the cruelest myths of modern life, a story that mistakes isolation for strength and suffering and silence for wisdom. Human beings are not designed for solitary struggle. We are herd animals, pack creatures, beings whose nervous systems are meant to co-regulate with other nervous systems. Your body knows this even when your mind forgets it. The relief you feel when someone truly understands what you're going through isn't weakness. It's your system recognizing its natural state, the way you were meant to move through difficulty surrounded by others who can share the load. Love shows up in unexpected forms when you stop insisting it look the way you think it should. Sometimes it appears as the stranger who holds the elevator door when you're running late. Sometimes it's the cashier who takes an extra moment to really see you when you're buying groceries while trying not to cry. Sometimes it's the way your pet seems to know exactly when you need comfort, offering their warm presence without question or condition. Love doesn't always announce itself with dramatic gestures or perfect timing. Often it whispers through small kindnesses, through the way someone remembers something you mentioned weeks ago, through the friend who shows up with soup when you're sick, through the neighbour who brings in your packages when you're away. These aren't consolation prizes while you wait for real love. These are love itself, showing up in its everyday clothes, doing its quiet work of connection and care. There are people you haven't met yet who will love you deeply. This isn't a romantic promise or a guarantee of a specific relationship. It's recognition that your path through life will continue to intersect with other paths in ways that create profound connection. Somewhere right now, there are people living their lives who will one day understand you in ways that make you feel seen, appreciated, valued for exactly who you are. These future connections exist in potential, waiting for the right timing, the right circumstances, the right moment when your readiness meets their availability. They might be friends who will become chosen family, mentors who will see your potential before you do, or companions who will share interests and passions that light you up in ways you haven't yet discovered. Even in silence, you are not forgotten. The people who love you carry you with them in ways you may never know. You exist in their memories during ordinary moments, when they smell something that reminds them of you, when they hear a song you introduced them to, when they encounter something beautiful and wish you were there to share it. Your presence has created neural pathways in their brains, emotional imprints in their hearts, stories that they tell about times when you made them laugh, helped them through difficulty, or simply existed alongside them in ways that mattered. Death doesn't sever these connections, it transforms them. The people who have died still live in the habits you learned from them, the phrases you caught yourself using that came from them, the way you approach certain situations because of what they taught you. They exist in the ripple effects of their love, in the ways their care changed you, that then changes how you care for others. The right people will find you when you stop performing. When you quit trying to be what you think others want and start being who you actually are, you create a frequency that attracts people who resonate with your authentic self. The exhausting work of maintaining personas and managing impressions isn't just draining, it's counterproductive. It draws people who love your performance while keeping away those who would love your truth. This doesn't mean you should abandon all social awareness or consideration for others. It means distinguishing between healthy adaptation to social situations and self-betrayal in service of acceptance. It means learning to modulate your expression while staying connected to your essence, to be appropriate without being false, to consider others' comfort without sacrificing your authenticity. You're allowed to ask for help. The mythology of independence that pervades modern culture has convinced many people that needing support is weakness, that asking for assistance is admitting failure, that the goal of maturity is to become completely self-sufficient. But interdependence is the actual human condition. No one achieves anything meaningful entirely alone. No one heals from significant wounds without some form of support. No one navigates life's complexity without guidance, encouragement, or simple companionship along the way. Asking for help is not an admission of inadequacy. It's an acknowledgement of reality. It's recognizing that you live in relationship with others, that your well-being is connected to their well-being, that community thrives when people can both give and receive support. The people who love you want to help when you're struggling, not because they see you as broken, but because they understand that helping each other is how love expresses itself practically. Everyone is carrying something invisible. The person who seems to have everything figured out is working through their own confusion. The one who appears supremely confident struggles with doubts you can't see. The individual who looks like they're sailing through life is probably paddling furiously underwater. This isn't cynicism, it's compassion. Recognizing that everyone faces challenges, even when those challenges aren't visible, helps you feel less alone in your own struggles while opening your heart to others in theirs. This shared experience of carrying invisible burdens creates a profound basis for connection. When you remember that everyone is dealing with something, grief, fear, uncertainty, pain, you approach interactions with more kindness, more patience, more willingness to see beyond the surface presentation to the human being underneath. You realize that the grumpy cashier might be grieving, that the impatient driver might be rushing to a hospital, that the withdrawn colleague might be managing their own form of overwhelm. The world is less lonely than it seems. Social media and news cycles create the illusion that everyone is isolated, that genuine connection is rare, that most people are too busy or self-absorbed to care about anyone else. But walk through any neighbourhood and you'll see evidence of daily kindness. People caring for elderly neighbours, parents helping each other with children, communities organising to support those in need. Look for the helpers, as the wise voice once suggested, and you'll find them everywhere. Look for the small acts of consideration, someone picking up trash that isn't theirs, letting another driver merge, holding a door, offering directions to someone who looks lost. These moments of connection happen constantly, creating a web of care that's largely invisible, but completely real. You're more connected than you realise. The coffee you drink connects you to farmers you'll never meet. The clothes you wear link you to workers around the world. The books you read connect you to authors who put their thoughts into words that found their way to your mind. The air you breathe has been breathed by countless others. The water you drink has been part of rivers, oceans, and clouds before reaching you. Beyond these physical connections, you're part of networks of care and influence that extend in all directions. You're connected to everyone you've ever helped, everyone who has helped you, everyone who remembers your kindness, everyone whose life has been touched by your presence. You're linked to people through shared experiences, common struggles, mutual friends, and the invisible threads that weave through human community. Your existence creates ripples that extend far beyond your awareness. The kindness you showed to someone in passing might have been exactly what they needed to keep going that day. The smile you offered to a stranger might have reminded them that goodness still exists in the world. The support you gave to a friend during their difficult time might have prevented them from giving up on something important. These connections don't require conscious maintenance or explicit acknowledgement to be real and powerful. They exist in the realm of impact rather than intention, influence rather than awareness. You are connected to countless people through the butterfly effect of your presence, your choices, your way of being in the world. The loneliness you sometimes feel is real and valid. It's important not to spiritualize it away or pretend it doesn't exist. But it's not the whole truth about your situation. Loneliness often arises not from actual isolation, but from feeling misunderstood, unseen, or disconnected from meaningful contact with others. It can exist even in crowded rooms, even in the middle of busy relationships, when the connections feel superficial or performative rather than genuine and nurturing. True remedy for loneliness often comes not from being around more people, but from deeper connection with fewer people. Not from constant social interaction, but from moments of genuine recognition and understanding. Sometimes it means reaching out when you'd rather withdraw, sometimes it means being vulnerable when you'd rather stay protected. Sometimes it means asking for what you need when you'd rather pretend you need nothing. The truth that you are not alone doesn't eliminate the experience of loneliness, but it provides context for it. It reminds you that the isolation you feel is temporary, that connection is available even when it's not immediately visible, that you belong to the human family even when you feel estranged from it. This belonging is not something you need to earn, achieve, or maintain through good behavior or social skills. It's woven into the fabric of your existence, as fundamental as your genetic connection to every living thing, as basic as your participation in the shared air, shared earth, shared experience of being conscious in a mysterious universe. You're held by this web of connection even when you can't feel it, supported by this network of care even when you can't see it, accompanied by this company of fellow travelers even when you feel like you're walking alone. The aloneness is temporary. The connection is eternal. The isolation is an experience. The belonging is a truth. And truth, as you're learning to remember, is always more fundamental than experience, always more lasting than feeling, always more real than the convincing stories your mind tells you when it forgets what your soul has always known. The most radical truth about your existence is that you're not a finished product awaiting judgment, but a living system in constant flux, always becoming something new while remaining essentially yourself. Every breath you take rewrites your body at the cellular level. Every experience you have reshapes your neural pathways. Every choice you make creates new possibilities for who you might become tomorrow. You're not the same person who began reading this sentence, and you will not be the same person who finishes it. This constant becoming is not a flaw in your design. It's the most magnificent feature of consciousness itself. You're not broken because you're changing. You're not failing because you're evolving. You're not behind schedule because your development doesn't match someone else's timeline. You're exactly on time for your own unfolding, perfectly positioned in the only moment where change can actually occur, right now. You're allowed to outgrow things, even people. This permission often feels revolutionary because so much of your conditioning teaches you to remain loyal to what you've outgrown, to maintain connections that no longer serve your growth, to stay in patterns that fit who you used to be rather than who you're becoming. But growth requires the courage to release what no longer fits, to honor what served you while acknowledging when it's time to move beyond it. Outgrowing doesn't mean rejecting or vilifying what you're leaving behind. A tree doesn't hate its smaller trunk when it grows taller. A butterfly doesn't despise the caterpillar it once was. You can be grateful for the people, places, beliefs, and habits that supported you at earlier stages of your development, while recognizing that they may not be appropriate for where you're going. Sometimes outgrowing people is the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and them. When you stay in relationships that no longer support your authentic growth, you often end up performing outdated versions of yourself to maintain the connection. This serves no one. It prevents you from becoming who you're meant to be, while depriving others of the opportunity to meet your evolving self or to grow in their own directions. Healing isn't linear, and that's not only okay, it's how healing actually works. The mythology of progress suggests that recovery should follow a straight line from dysfunction to function, from pain to peace, from confusion to clarity. But real healing moves in spirals, revisiting familiar territory at new levels of understanding, circling back to old wounds with new tools, returning to previous patterns with greater consciousness. You haven't failed when you find yourself dealing with something you thought you'd already resolved. You haven't lost progress when old patterns resurface during times of stress. You haven't wasted your effort when familiar emotions return despite your growth. This is how integration happens, through repetition, through practice, through meeting the same challenges with increasing skill and awareness. Think of healing like learning to play an instrument. You don't play a song perfectly once and then never need to practice it again. You return to the same pieces repeatedly, each time with greater technical skill, deeper emotional understanding, more nuanced interpretation. The song remains the same, but your relationship to it transforms. Healing works similarly. You encounter the same themes throughout your life, but your capacity to work with them develops and deepens. It's never too late to start again. This truth feels almost impossible to believe when you're carrying years of choices that led you away from what you wanted, decades of patterns that no longer serve you, or simply the weight of time that seems to have passed while you were figuring things out. But starting again doesn't mean erasing everything you've done or learned. It means beginning from where you are now, with everything you've gained along the way. Every moment offers the possibility of a new beginning. Every breath is a fresh start. Every day provides another opportunity to choose differently, to move in a direction that better aligns with who you're becoming. The past doesn't trap you in predetermined patterns. It provides you with information, experience, and wisdom that can inform better choices moving forward. People begin new careers in their 60s, find love in their 70s, discover talents in their 80s, and continue growing until their final breath. Life doesn't have expiration dates on dreams, cut-off points for change, or deadlines for becoming who you're meant to be. As long as you're alive, you're still becoming. You can reinvent yourself at any age. The belief that personality is fixed, that character is set in stone by early adulthood, that you are who you are and cannot fundamentally change is one of the most limiting myths of human development. While certain temperamental tendencies may remain consistent, the ways you express those tendencies, the skills you develop, the beliefs you hold, the habits you practice, the relationships you create, all of these can shift dramatically at any stage of life. Reinvention doesn't require dramatic external changes or complete abandonment of your history. Sometimes it's as simple as beginning to see yourself differently, treating yourself with more kindness, speaking to yourself with greater compassion. Sometimes it involves developing new capacities that were always within you but never cultivated. Sometimes it means returning to aspects of yourself that you abandoned somewhere along the way. Change means you're alive. In a universe where everything is constantly in motion, planets spinning, seasons cycling, cells regenerating, your own changeability is not a problem to be solved, but a sign that you're participating fully in the dynamic nature of existence. Only dead things remain exactly the same. Living things grow, adapt, evolve, and transform. The anxiety you sometimes feel about changing is understandable. Change involves uncertainty, and uncertainty can feel threatening to the parts of you that crave security and predictability. But the stability you're seeking doesn't come from remaining the same. It comes from developing the capacity to remain centered, while everything around you and within you continues to shift. Setbacks are part of the rhythm, not the end of the song. When you're moving towards something important, healing from trauma, building new habits, developing skills, creating relationships, you will encounter obstacles, reverses, and apparent failures. These aren't signs that you should give up. They're normal features of any meaningful growth process. Nature demonstrates this rhythm constantly. Rivers don't flow in straight lines. They meander, creating oxbows and curves that seem inefficient, but are actually necessary for the health of the watershed. Plants don't grow at steady rates. They have periods of rapid growth and periods of apparent dormancy that are essential for root development. Your own growth follows similar patterns, with advances and retreats, breakthroughs and consolidations, periods of visible progress and times of invisible preparation. When you experience setbacks, you're not starting over from zero. You're returning to familiar territory with all the knowledge, experience, and growth you've accumulated since you were last there. Each return brings new perspective, different resources, and greater capacity to handle what previously overwhelmed you. You can forgive yourself without forgetting what you learned. Self-forgiveness doesn't require amnesia about your mistakes or denial about the impact of your choices. It means releasing the self-punishment that keeps you trapped in patterns of shame and self-attack while retaining the wisdom that your experiences have provided. Guilt can be useful when it motivates behavioral change, but shame is almost never constructive. Guilt says, "I did something wrong," and invites correction. Shame says, "I am something wrong," and invites hiding. Forgiveness allows you to acknowledge that you did something that caused harm to yourself or others, without concluding that you are fundamentally flawed or unworthy of compassion. The goal isn't to become someone who never makes mistakes, but to become someone who makes mistakes without being destroyed by them, who learns from poor choices without being defined by them, who can acknowledge wrongdoing without abandoning self-respect. This kind of forgiveness actually makes you more likely to make amends and less likely to repeat harmful patterns. Growth sometimes looks like rest. In a culture obsessed with visible progress and measurable advancement, the periods when growth happens underground, during rest, reflection, integration, and apparent inactivity, are often dismissed as wasted time. But seeds germinate in darkness. Trees develop their strongest root systems during seasons when no visible growth occurs. Your own development follows similar patterns. Sometimes the most important growth happens when you're sleeping, when your brain processes the day's experiences and consolidates learning. Sometimes it occurs during quiet moments when you're not trying to grow at all, when insights arise spontaneously from the spaciousness of an unscheduled mind. Sometimes it takes place during periods of rest when your nervous system finally has the safety and stability necessary to integrate previous experiences. Rest is not the opposite of growth. It's one of the conditions that makes growth possible. The constant pushing, striving, and efforting that characterizes much of modern life often interferes with the natural rhythms of development. Just as muscles need recovery time between workouts to build strength, your entire system needs periods of ease to consolidate new capacities. You're not behind. This simple statement contradicts one of the most pervasive sources of suffering in modern life: the belief that you should be further along than you are, that others your age have accomplished more, that you've somehow fallen behind in the race toward success, happiness, or fulfillment. But there is no universal timeline for human development. There's no schedule that determines when you should reach certain milestones, achieve particular goals, or arrive at specific states of wisdom or maturity. People develop at different rates, face different challenges, and have access to different resources at different times in their lives. The only meaningful comparison is between where you are now and where you were before. The only relevant timeline is your own. The only race you're running is the one between your current self and your potential self, and in that race, every step forward counts regardless of how long it takes or how it compares to anyone else's progress. Becoming is messy, but still beautiful. The process of transformation is rarely as clean and linear as the stories we tell about it afterward. Real growth involves confusion, uncertainty, periods of not knowing who you are or where you're going. It includes making mistakes, changing your mind, trying things that don't work, and discovering that what you thought you wanted isn't what actually fulfills you. This messiness isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. The uncertainty creates space for possibility. The mistakes provide crucial information. The confusion indicates that you're growing beyond your previous understanding. The periods of not knowing create openings for new knowledge to emerge. A butterfly's transformation inside a chrysalis is completely chaotic. The caterpillar literally dissolves into cellular soup before reorganizing into its new form. If you could observe this process, it would look like destruction rather than development. Your own periods of transition often feel similarly chaotic, like everything you knew about yourself is dissolving without clear evidence of what's emerging to replace it. But something is always emerging, even when you can't see it. Even in your most confused moments, even when you feel most lost, even when you can't imagine how things will ever make sense again, the process of becoming continues. Your system is always organizing toward greater complexity, greater capacity, greater consciousness. even when that organisation is invisible to your conscious mind. The becoming never stops. You're not moving toward a final destination where you will be complete, finished, done. You're not working toward a version of yourself that will no longer need to grow, change, or evolve. You're engaged in an endless process of becoming, an infinite spiral of development that continues as long as you're alive. This is not a failure of the human condition, it's its greatest glory. You get to keep discovering new aspects of yourself, new capacities, new ways of being in the world. You get to keep surprising yourself with who you become, how you respond to challenges, what you're capable of when circumstances call it forth. The becoming is not a burden to be endured, but a gift to be celebrated. You're not a problem in need of solving, but a mystery in the process of revealing itself. You're not behind schedule, but exactly on time for your own unfolding. You're not a finished product, but a living work of art, always adding new colours, new textures, new dimensions to the masterpiece of your own existence. The most profound experiences of your life might not be the ones you remember as profound. There might be the Tuesday morning when light hit your coffee cup in a way that stopped you mid-sip, suddenly aware that you were alive, that you could taste warmth and feel gratitude and witness beauty in something as simple as steam rising from liquid in ceramic. They might be the moment you looked up from washing dishes and caught your reflection in the window, not with the usual criticism or analysis, but with a strange tenderness for this being who has carried you through so many days. We live in a culture that teaches us to wait for the extraordinary, the perfect relationship, the dream job, the life-changing travel experience, the moment when everything finally clicks into place and we can begin to really live. But while we're waiting for life to become worthy of our full attention, life is happening in kitchen conversations and morning commutes, in the way your pet greets you when you come home, and the sound of rain on the roof while you're falling asleep. A quiet morning can change everything. Not because anything dramatic occurs, but because quiet mornings create space for noticing what's always been there. In the soft light before the world demands your attention, in the moments before you check your phone or start your to-do list, there's a quality of presence available that can transform how you move through the entire day. These morning moments often feel like conversations with yourself that you didn't know you needed to have. The stillness allows thoughts to surface that get buried under the noise of busy days. The solitude creates room for feelings that don't have space when you're managing obligations and interactions. The pace allows for the kind of deep breathing that resets your nervous system and reminds your body that not everything is urgent. You don't need to wake up at dawn or follow any particular routine to access this quality of presence. You just need to notice when spaciousness is available and inhabit it fully rather than immediately filling it with productivity or stimulation. Sometimes a quiet morning happens at 2 p.m. when you find yourself alone in a place where the light feels soft and time feels suspended. Breathing is a miracle that happens 20,000 times a day without your conscious participation. Your body knows how to extract oxygen from air, how to circulate it through your bloodstream, how to power every cell in your system through this constant exchange with the atmosphere around you. You are always in relationship with the world through your breath, always connected to the trees that produce the oxygen you need, always participating in the ancient cycle that has sustained life for billions of years. When you pay attention to breathing, not trying to control it, just noticing it, you connect with something larger than your individual existence. You remember that you're part of an ecosystem, dependent on and contributing to the web of life that includes everything from the smallest bacteria to the largest whales. Each exhale contains carbon dioxide that plants can use. Each inhale brings you the gift that plants have prepared for you. This exchange happens so automatically that it's easy to take for granted, to treat as mere mechanical function, rather than as the profound collaboration between your body and the world that it actually is. But when you tune into the rhythm of your breath, when you feel the expansion and contraction, when you notice the pause between inhale and exhale, you access a direct experience of the sacred operating through the most ordinary function of being alive. Small things matter more than we know. The text you send to check on someone who's been on your mind might arrive exactly when they need to know they're not forgotten. The smile you offer to the grocery store clerk might be the first genuine kindness they've received all day. The way you listen when your friend tells you about their worry might provide the spaciousness they need to find their own solution. These moments don't feel significant when they're happening. They seem like basic human decency, like the minimum requirements for moving through the world with consideration for others. But small acts of attention and care create the foundation of a life worth living, both for you and for everyone whose path intersects with yours. The person whose life is changed by your small kindness might never tell you about it. They might not even consciously recognize the impact in the moment. But kindness creates ripples that extend far beyond the immediate interaction. The person who receives your consideration might be more patient with the next person they encounter. The friend who feels heard by you might have the emotional resources to support someone else who needs them. Peace often hides in routine. The very activities that can feel monotonous or mundane, making your bed, preparing food, tidying your space, often contain doorways to presence and contentment when approached with attention rather than rushing through them as obstacles to more important activities. There's something deeply satisfying about completing simple tasks that have clear beginnings and endings. Folding laundry, washing dishes, organising a drawer. These activities offer your mind a break from complex problems and abstract concerns while giving you the concrete experience of bringing order to small corners of your world. They're forms of meditation disguised as household maintenance. When you approach routine tasks as opportunities for presence rather than burdens to be rushed through, they transform from drudgery into doorways. The warm water on your hands while washing dishes becomes a sensory experience rather than just a means to an end. The rhythm of sweeping becomes a moving meditation. The process of preparing food becomes an act of care for the body that carries you through your days. You don't need fireworks to feel alive. The aliveness that you're seeking might be available right now in the sensation of air moving in and out of your lungs, in the feeling of your feet making contact with the ground, in the awareness that your heart is beating without any effort or attention from your conscious mind. You don't need dramatic experiences to access wonder. You need only to pay attention to the drama that's always unfolding in the simple fact of being embodied and conscious in a universe that's somehow arranged itself so that such a thing is possible. The most alive moments are often the quietest ones, when you're fully present with what's actually happening rather than mentally rehearsing what might happen or reviewing what has already happened. Aliveness isn't about intensity of stimulation. It's about depth of presence. It's not about how much you can cram into your experience, but how fully you can inhabit whatever experience you're having. Joy is often subtle, appearing not as the overwhelming happiness that movies and advertisements promise, but as a quiet appreciation that arises when you're not demanding that life be different from what it is. Joy shows up in the satisfaction of completing something you've been putting off, in the comfort of being in a familiar place with familiar people, in the simple pleasure of being warm when it's cold outside or cool when it's hot. This subtle joy doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It doesn't create social media moments or dramatic stories to tell friends. It's the contentment that arises when you're reading something that interests you, when you're having a conversation that feels genuine, when you're moving your body in ways that feel good, when you're eating food that nourishes you while you're actually hungry for it. Learning to notice and appreciate subtle joy is like developing a new sense organ. Once you begin to recognize it, you discover that opportunities for this quiet satisfaction are everywhere. In the way morning light looks different from afternoon light, in the particular comfort of your favorite chair, in the sound of someone you love laughing in the next room. Ordinary moments become precious later. The Tuesday afternoon when nothing special happened, when you were just living your regular life in your regular way, might become the day you remember most fondly when you're looking back years from now. The conversation you had while stuck in traffic, the meal you shared without any special occasion, the evening you spent doing nothing in particular. These unremarkable experiences often become the ones you wish you could return to. This happens because ordinary moments contain something that special occasions often don't: the absence of pressure to be meaningful. In ordinary time, you can simply exist without performing significance, without capturing memories, without making sure the experience lives up to expectations. You can be genuinely present rather than managing your experience of being present. The preciousness of ordinary moments reveals itself gradually. While you're living them, They feel like filler between more important events. But time has a way of clarifying what actually mattered, and often what mattered most were the spaces between the supposed highlights, the car rides and kitchen conversations, the quiet mornings and routine evenings, the thousands of unremarkable interactions that created the texture of a life shared with people you cared about. Beauty doesn't always announce itself. Some of the most breathtaking experiences of beauty are also the most easily missed. The way shadows fall across a wall in late afternoon, the pattern that frost makes on a window, the particular blue of the sky just before sunset, the grace with which someone you love moves through space when they think no one is watching. This unannounced beauty requires what poets call soft eyes, a way of looking that doesn't search for specific things, but remains open to whatever wants to be seen. It's a quality of attention that notices rather than seeks, that receives rather than grasps, that appreciates rather than evaluates. When you develop the capacity to notice beauty that doesn't advertise itself, you discover that you're surrounded by it constantly. The curve of a coffee cup handle, the way light moves across water, the expression on someone's face when they're absorbed in thought, the sound of leaves rustling in wind. These experiences are available every day, but they require presence to perceive and appreciation to receive. Presence is more powerful than productivity. In a culture that measures worth through output and achievement, the simple act of being fully where you are, paying attention to what's actually happening, giving your complete focus to whoever you're with becomes a radical act. Presence is the gift you can offer in any situation, regardless of your skills, resources, or achievements. When you're truly present with someone, you offer them something that's increasingly rare: your undivided attention. You create space for them to be themselves without performance, judgment, or distraction. You become a witness to their experience in ways that can be profoundly healing and affirming. This kind of presence doesn't require special training or credentials. It requires only the willingness to set aside your agenda and be genuinely available to what's happening now. Presence also transforms your own experience of whatever you're doing. Food tastes more complex when you're paying attention while eating it. Conversations become more satisfying when you're listening with your whole being rather than planning what to say next. Work becomes more engaging when you're focused on the task itself, rather than rushing through it to get to the next thing. Some of life's best days won't look special at all. There'll be the days when you wake up feeling rested, when small things go smoothly, when you have unhurried conversations with people you enjoy, when you feel grateful for ordinary comforts, when you go to sleep satisfied with how you spent your time without having accomplished anything that would impress anyone else. These days don't create exciting stories or memorable photos. They don't generate accomplishments that build your resume or experiences that enhance your social media presence. But they create something more valuable: the felt sense of a life well lived, the deep satisfaction that comes from being genuinely present with your actual existence, rather than constantly reaching for some other version of life that seems more worthy of your attention. The best days often contain a quality of ease that allows you to inhabit your life fully, rather than constantly trying to improve it, escape it, or document it. They're characterized not by what happens, but by how you meet what happens, with presence, with acceptance, with appreciation for the gift of consciousness itself. The sacred is not separate from the ordinary. It's the ordinary experienced with full attention. Every moment contains the possibility of reverence. Every interaction offers an opportunity for genuine connection. Every breath is a chance to remember that you're participating in the most extraordinary thing imaginable: existence itself. When you stop waiting for life to become sacred and start recognizing the sacredness that's already here, everything changes. The morning coffee becomes a ritual. The commute becomes a transition ceremony. The evening routine becomes a practice of gratitude, not because you've added anything to these activities, but because you've brought your full presence to them. This recognition doesn't require belief in any particular spiritual system or adherence to any specific practice. It requires only the willingness to pay attention, to notice what's actually happening, to appreciate the miracle of ordinary existence that's unfolding constantly around you and within you. The invitation is simple: stop waiting for life to become worthy of your attention and start bringing your attention to the life that's already here. Stop postponing presence until something more interesting happens, and start discovering the depth available in whatever is happening now. Stop seeking the extraordinary outside yourself, and start recognizing the extraordinary nature of the ordinary life you're already living. The most exhausting weight you carry is often the one you don't have to carry at all. The burden of holding on to what has already ended, demanding answers that may never come, insisting that life provide the closure that you've been taught to believe is necessary before you can move forward. Somewhere along the way, you learned that letting go meant giving up, that release was the same as defeat, that the inability to resolve every story meant failure rather than wisdom. But your hands were never meant to become permanent storage containers for experiences that have run their course. Your heart was not designed to be a museum for relationships that no longer exist. Your mind was never intended to be a courtroom endlessly reviewing cases that have already been decided by time, circumstance, and the fundamental mystery of how things unfold in ways you cannot predict or control. You can let go without having closure. This truth contradicts one of the most persistent myths of healing, the belief that you cannot move forward until every question has been answered, every hurt has been explained, every ending has been properly concluded with understanding, apology, or resolution. But life rarely provides the neat conclusions that your mind craves. Most stories end with ellipses rather than periods, with mystery rather than clarity, with acceptance rather than explanation. The closure you're seeking often exists not in external resolution but in internal completion, not in getting the other person to understand your perspective, but in understanding it yourself, not in receiving the apology you deserve but in releasing your attachment to receiving it, not in making sense of what happened, but in making peace with the fact that some things will never make sense. This internal closure comes not from having all your questions answered, but from accepting that some questions don't have answers, at least not the kind of answers that your rational mind can grasp and file away as resolved. It comes from recognizing that your well-being doesn't depend on other people's acknowledgement of their impact on you, their understanding of your experience, or their willingness to provide the explanations you feel you need. Not everything needs to be understood. The compulsion to understand everything, why people behave as they do, why certain events occurred, why life unfolded as it has rather than as you hoped it would, can become a prison that keeps you trapped in mental loops, endlessly analysing and reanalyzing experiences in search of insights that may not exist, or clarity that may not be possible. Understanding is valuable when it leads to wisdom, growth, or better choices in the future. But the pursuit of understanding becomes problematic when it becomes compulsive, when it prevents you from moving forward, when it demands certainty in a universe that operates through mystery and surprise. Some things are meant to be felt rather than understood, experienced rather than explained, accepted rather than analysed. The peace that comes from releasing the need to understand everything is profound. It frees mental and emotional energy that can be redirected toward creating the life you want, rather than endlessly reviewing the life you've had. It allows you to engage with present realities rather than remaining trapped in past puzzles. It opens space for new experiences instead of rehearsing old ones. You don't need their permission to move forward. The belief that you require approval, blessing, or acknowledgement from others before you can proceed with your life is one of the most subtle forms of self-imprisonment. It keeps you waiting for phone calls that may never come, conversations that may never happen, recognition that may never be offered, understanding that may never be achieved. Your life belongs to you. Your choices are yours to make. Your healing is yours to pursue. Your happiness is yours to create. No one else has the authority to determine when you're ready to let go, when you're allowed to forgive, when you're permitted to love again, when you're authorized to try something new. These decisions rest with you alone. This doesn't mean that other people's feelings and perspectives don't matter. It doesn't mean that you should proceed without considering the impact of your choices on those around you. It means recognizing that waiting for permission that may never come is often a way of avoiding the responsibility and uncertainty that comes with making your own decisions about your own life. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is to stop waiting for their permission and start living according to your own deepest knowing about what will serve your growth and well-being. Sometimes your willingness to move forward gives others permission to do the same. Sometimes your courage to let go creates space for everyone to heal in their own way and time. Letting go is not the same as giving up. This distinction is crucial because it's often the confusion between these two concepts that makes release feel like betrayal of your values, abandonment of what matters to you, or surrender to defeat. But letting go is not about stopping caring. It's about caring so much that you're willing to release your attachment to specific outcomes in service of everyone's highest good. When you let go of a relationship that's no longer working, you're not giving up on love. You're making space for love to express itself in healthier ways. When you release your attachment to a particular outcome, you're not abandoning your goals. You're opening yourself to possibilities that may be even better than what you originally imagined. When you stop trying to control how someone else responds to you, you're not giving up on connection. You're creating space for authentic relationship to emerge. Letting go often requires tremendous strength, courage, and faith. It means trusting that life will support you even when you can't see how. It means believing that better things are possible even when your current experience doesn't provide evidence for that belief. It means choosing hope over control, flow over force, trust over manipulation. Peace is better than control. The illusion of control promises security, predictability, and the ability to prevent unwanted outcomes through sufficient vigilance and effort. But control is always an illusion, and the energy required to maintain this illusion is enormous. The peace that comes from releasing the need to control outcomes is like setting down a backpack you didn't realize you were carrying. Suddenly you can move with ease, breathe more deeply, and see possibilities that were hidden by your tunnel vision focus on managing results. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning all effort to influence your circumstances. It means distinguishing between what you can actually control, your choices, your responses, your actions, and what you cannot control, other people's choices, unexpected events, the timing of outcomes. When you focus your energy on what you can actually influence and release your attachment to what you cannot, you become far more effective while experiencing far less stress. The peace that comes from releasing control allows you to respond to life rather than react to it, to dance with circumstances rather than fight against them, to work with reality rather than demand that reality conform to your preferences. This doesn't make you weak or passive. It makes you flexible, responsive, and ultimately more powerful because you're working with the grain of life rather than against it. It's okay to walk away, even from what once felt right. One of the most difficult truths to accept is that things can be right for a period of time and then become wrong without anyone being at fault, without anything being broken, without any failure having occurred. People grow in different directions. Circumstances change. What serves you at one stage of life may not serve you at another. The guilt that often accompanies walking away from something that once felt right stems from the belief that if something was ever good, it should remain good forever. That if you once chose something, you should continue to choose it regardless of how it evolves. But this belief traps you in static relationships with dynamic realities. It demands that you remain loyal to past versions of people, situations, and your own needs, rather than staying current with how everything continues to change. Walking away doesn't necessarily mean abandoning forever. Sometimes it means taking the space you need to gain perspective, to do your own growth work, to develop new capacities that might allow for a different kind of relationship in the future. Sometimes it means loving someone enough to release them from your expectations about who they should be, so they can discover who they're becoming. The decision to walk away from what once felt right often requires you to trust your current intuition over your past reasoning, your present knowing over your previous commitments, your evolving needs over your historical promises. This can feel like betrayal, but it's actually integrity. The willingness to remain honest about your experience, even when that honesty leads to difficult choices. You can release what no longer serves you. This permission extends beyond relationships to beliefs, habits, goals, identities, and ways of being that may have been helpful at one time but have become limitations rather than supports. The courage to release what no longer serves you is the courage to keep growing rather than calcifying into fixed patterns that no longer fit your expanding self. Sometimes what no longer serves you is obvious. The friendship that has become toxic, the job that drains your life force, the belief about yourself that keeps you small. But sometimes what no longer serves you is more subtle. The perfectionism that once motivated you but now paralyzes you. The independence that once protected you but now isolates you. The identity that once felt empowering but now feels confining. Releasing what no longer serves you doesn't mean rejecting everything about your past or dismissing the value that these things once had in your life. It means honoring what they contributed while acknowledging that their time of usefulness has passed. It means being grateful for how they supported you while recognizing that continuing to hold on to them would prevent the growth that wants to happen next. Not everything broken needs to be fixed. The compulsion to repair everything that's damaged, relationships, situations, systems, even people, can become an exhausting burden that prevents you from accepting reality as it is and moving forward with what's actually possible. Some things are meant to break, some things are meant to end, some things are meant to remain unrepaired, because attempting to fix them would require more energy than creating something new. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to suffering or abandoning all efforts to heal what can be healed. It means developing the wisdom to distinguish between what can be repaired and what needs to be released, between what deserves your continued energy and what would be better served by your acceptance of its completion. The Serenity Prayer captures this wisdom. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. The middle part gets most of the attention, but the first part, accepting what cannot be changed, is often the most challenging and the most liberating. Closure often comes from within. The external closure you're seeking, the apology, the explanation, the acknowledgement, the resolution, may never come. But the internal closure you need, the peace, the acceptance, the ability to move forward, is always available because it depends on your relationship with your own experience rather than on other people's responses to that experience. Internal closure comes from telling yourself the truth about what happened, feeling your feelings about it fully rather than pushing them away, extracting whatever learning is available from the experience, and then choosing to focus your energy on what you can create going forward, rather than on what you cannot change about what has already occurred. This process often requires grieving, not just for what you lost, but for what you never had, what you hoped for, but didn't receive, what you imagined might have been possible. Grieving is how you release your attachment to alternative versions of reality, so you can engage fully with actual reality. It's how you honor what mattered to you while accepting that it's time to invest your care in new possibilities. You can love and still leave. Perhaps the most difficult release involves situations where love remains, but circumstances make staying impossible or inadvisable. You can love someone deeply and still recognize that living with them doesn't work. You can care about someone profoundly and still need to create distance for your own well-being. You can value a relationship tremendously and still acknowledge that it has run its course. Love doesn't require you to sacrifice your well-being, to tolerate treatment that harms you, or to remain in situations that prevent your growth. Love doesn't mean staying regardless of circumstances. Sometimes love means leaving. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is release someone from your expectations about who they should be and how they should love you. The belief that real love means never leaving, never giving up, never setting boundaries that might cause disappointment or conflict is a distortion that often keeps people trapped in situations that serve no one well. Real love includes the wisdom to recognize when togetherness serves love, and when separation serves love, when holding on expresses care, and when letting go expresses care. Loving someone and leaving them can coexist because love is not the same as attachment. Love wants the beloved to flourish, even if that flourishing happens without you. Attachment wants the beloved to remain available to you, even if that availability prevents their flourishing. Love trusts the process of life. Attachment tries to control it. Love is willing to be disappointed. Attachment is terrified of disappointment. The grief that comes from loving and leaving is real and should be honored. It's the natural response to the end of something that mattered, something that shaped you, something that will always be part of your story even though it's no longer part of your daily life. This grief doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you're human, that you have the capacity to love deeply, that endings can be necessary and heartbreaking simultaneously. Letting go is ultimately an act of faith. Faith that life will support you as you release what has ended. Faith that new possibilities will emerge as you create space for them. Faith that the love you're seeking will find you as you stop grasping for love in places where it's no longer flowing freely. This faith doesn't require certainty about what comes next. It requires only the willingness to trust the process of release and renewal that governs everything in the natural world. When you learn to let go with grace, you discover that release is not loss but transformation, not ending but beginning, not emptiness but space for something new to grow. You discover that your hands are not meant to be storage containers but instruments of both holding and releasing, that your heart is not meant to be a museum but a living space that can house new love as it emerges, that your life is not meant to be a monument to what was but a canvas for what might yet be created. There's a moment in every deep wound when you forget that you existed before the hurt began, when the pain becomes so familiar that it feels like your natural state, when the story of what happened to you starts to feel like the story of who you are. The wound begins to speak in your voice, to make decisions with your hands, to see the world through your eyes until you can barely remember what it felt like to move through life without carrying this particular weight. But you are not what happened to you. You are not the sum of your traumas, the total of your losses, the catalogue of your disappointments. You're not your worst day, your biggest mistake, or your deepest regret. You're not the moments when life overwhelmed you, when others failed you, when circumstances broke you temporarily apart. You are what grows from all of this, the wisdom earned, the compassion developed, the strength discovered, the love that remains despite everything that tried to convince you that love wasn't safe. The confusion between what you've experienced and who you are is one of the most common forms of identity theft, committed not by external criminals but by pain itself, which has a way of colonizing consciousness until suffering feels like your most authentic self. Pain whispers that it knows you better than joy does, that it's more honest than hope, that it's the truest thing about your life because it's the thing you feel most deeply. But pain is a visitor, not a resident. It's an experience you're having, not the experiencer itself. It's weather that moves through the landscape of your being, not the landscape itself. Even in your most difficult moments, even when the hurt feels bigger than your capacity to hold it, there's something in you that remains untouched by the circumstances that create suffering, an essential self that witnesses pain without being consumed by it, that feels deeply without being defined by what it feels. Pain changes you, but it's not all you are. This distinction is crucial because it's the difference between allowing difficult experiences to shape you and allowing them to become you. When you recognize that pain changes you rather than creating you, you can begin to see how suffering has contributed to your development without concluding that suffering is your identity. The ways that pain changes you are often profound and positive, even when they don't feel positive while they're happening. Heartbreak teaches you about the depth of your capacity to love. Loss shows you what you truly value. Trauma reveals your resilience. Disappointment develops your ability to hope despite uncertainty. These lessons become part of you, but they don't become all of you. Pain often acts like a master teacher disguised as an enemy, forcing you to develop capacities you didn't know you possessed, revealing strengths you didn't know you had, connecting you to parts of yourself that only emerge under pressure. It strips away illusions that may have been comfortable but weren't serving your growth. It demands that you discover resources within yourself that you might never have accessed in easier circumstances. Grief is a form of love. This truth transforms how you understand the experience of loss, removing the pathology from sadness and restoring its sacred purpose. Grief is not a problem to be solved or a condition to be cured. It's love with nowhere to go, care that continues even when its object is no longer present. The heart's way of honouring what mattered enough to hurt when it ended. When you grieve, you're not being weak or broken or stuck in the past. You're demonstrating the profound human capacity to love beyond presence, to care beyond circumstance, to hold space for what's gone while continuing to engage with what remains. Grief is proof that something mattered deeply enough to change you, that your heart is capable of bonds that death cannot sever and loss cannot diminish. The pressure to get over grief quickly, to move on from loss efficiently, to heal from heartbreak on a prescribed timeline, comes from a culture that misunderstands both the nature of love and the purpose of pain. But some losses are meant to be carried, not overcome. Some grief is meant to be integrated, not eliminated. Some sadness is meant to deepen you, not to be healed away. This doesn't mean wallowing in sadness or allowing grief to prevent you from engaging with life. It means recognizing that the absence of someone or something you loved creates a permanent change in your internal landscape, and that learning to live with that change is part of learning to live fully. It means understanding that moving forward doesn't require leaving your love behind. It requires learning to carry love in new ways. Feeling deeply is not a weakness. In a culture that often treats sensitivity as a liability, that medicates sadness and pathologizes anxiety, that interprets emotional responsiveness as instability, the capacity to feel deeply can seem like a design flaw rather than a feature. But your ability to feel profoundly is not a bug in your system. It's evidence of your aliveness, your connectedness, your capacity for rich experience. People who feel deeply also love deeply, create meaningfully, and connect authentically. They notice subtleties that others miss, respond to beauty that might go unappreciated, and offer empathy that can heal wounds they didn't create. The same nervous system that allows you to feel pain intensely also allows you to experience joy, gratitude, wonder, and love with corresponding depth. The sensitivity that makes you vulnerable to being hurt also makes you capable of being healed by small kindnesses, moved by simple beauty, and nourished by subtle connections. When you try to numb yourself to pain, you also numb yourself to pleasure. When you armor yourself against hurt, you also block your access to joy. The capacity for deep feeling is indivisible. You cannot selectively anesthetize yourself to negative emotions without also dulling your capacity for positive ones. You survived so much. This simple statement contains a profound recognition that's easy to forget when you're focused on current struggles or future concerns. Look back at what you've already lived through, the losses that felt unsurvivable, the disappointments that seemed devastating, the fears that appeared insurmountable, the changes that felt impossible to navigate. Yet here you are, reading these words, breathing this breath, continuing the complex work of being human despite everything that tried to convince you to give up. Your survival is not just evidence of your resilience, it's proof of your fundamental adequacy to the task of living. You've already demonstrated that you can handle loss, endure pain, navigate uncertainty, and continue loving despite being hurt. You've shown that you can be broken and still mend, can be confused and still choose, can be afraid and still act. This recognition doesn't minimize current difficulties or suggest that past survival guarantees future success. It simply acknowledges the track record you've already established, the evidence you've already provided of your capacity to meet challenging circumstances and emerge changed but intact. When you remember what you've already survived, current challenges feel more manageable because you have proof of your ability to handle whatever life presents. Healing is not always visible. The mythology of recovery suggests that healing should be obvious, measurable, demonstrable, through clear improvements in function, mood, or circumstance. But much of the most important healing happens in invisible ways, in the gradual shift of internal dialogue from cruel to kind, in the slow rebuilding of trust in your own judgment, in the quiet development of new patterns that support your well-being rather than undermine it. Sometimes healing looks like having a difficult day and not concluding that you're broken. Sometimes it appears as feeling triggered by something and responding skillfully rather than reactively. Sometimes it manifests as choosing self-compassion over self-attack when you make a mistake. These internal shifts may not be apparent to others, but they represent profound transformations in how you relate to yourself and your experience. The invisibility of much healing can make it easy to underestimate your progress. to focus on what still needs work rather than acknowledging how far you've come. It can make you feel like you're not doing enough, not improving fast enough, not becoming healthy enough quickly enough. But healing operates on its own timeline, following its own logic, unfolding according to your system's unique needs and capacities. It's okay to still be hurting. Permission to still be in pain is one of the most healing things you can give yourself, especially in a culture that treats ongoing difficulty as evidence of personal failure or insufficient effort. But some pain takes time to process. Some wounds need to be felt fully before they can be released. Some grief requires years of patient attention before it transforms into wisdom. Giving yourself permission to still be hurting doesn't mean wallowing in pain or using it as an excuse to avoid growth. It means recognizing that healing is a process, not an event, and that processes take time. It means treating yourself with the same compassion you would offer a friend who is struggling, the same patience you would give a child who is learning something difficult. When you stop fighting your pain and start holding it with kindness, when you stop trying to heal faster and start trusting your own timing, when you stop judging your process and start honoring your experience, the pain often begins to shift naturally. Not because you're trying to make it change, but because acceptance creates the conditions within which transformation becomes possible. You're allowed to carry both joy and sorrow. One of the most sophisticated lies about emotional health is that you should feel one thing at a time, that positive and negative emotions are mutually exclusive, that the presence of sadness negates happiness, or that experiencing joy while grieving means you didn't love deeply enough. But emotional maturity includes the capacity to hold multiple, sometimes contradictory feelings simultaneously. You can be grateful for what you have while mourning what you've lost. You can feel hopeful about the future while sad about the past. You can experience love and anger toward the same person, excitement and fear about the same opportunity, pride and regret about the same choice. This emotional complexity is not confusion, it's sophistication. It's evidence of your capacity to respond fully to the multifaceted nature of human experience, rather than flattening everything into simple categories. It's proof that your heart is large enough to hold the full spectrum of what it means to be alive in a world that contains both beauty and heartbreak, both connection and loss, both meaning and mystery. Learning to hold multiple emotions without needing to resolve them into a single feeling is part of developing emotional resilience. It allows you to be present with whatever is actually happening rather than trying to manage your experience into something more comfortable or comprehensible. It permits you to be human rather than demanding that you be simple. Even when it aches, you are still growing. Growth often feels like stretching, like being pulled beyond your current capacity, like being asked to become larger than you've been before. This expansion can be uncomfortable, disorienting, even painful as old patterns dissolve and new capacities emerge. But the discomfort of growth is different from the pain of stagnation. It's productive rather than destructive, temporary rather than permanent, purposeful rather than meaningless. When you're in the middle of growth that aches, it can be difficult to distinguish between healing and hurting, between transformation and trauma, between expansion and damage. But growth pain has a quality of aliveness to it, a sense of movement even when that movement is uncomfortable. There's often a feeling of rightness underneath the difficulty, a recognition that this challenge is somehow necessary for your development. The aching that accompanies growth is like the soreness that follows a good workout, evidence that your system is adapting, strengthening, developing new capacities. It's temporary discomfort in service of lasting expansion, short-term pain that serves long-term gain. When you can recognize growth pain for what it is, you can endure it more gracefully because you understand its purpose. You are more resilient than you think. Resilience isn't the absence of difficulty or the ability to remain unaffected by challenging circumstances. Resilience is the capacity to be affected by difficulty and still recover, to be changed by trauma and still heal, to be knocked down by life and still find ways to get back up. Your resilience has been proven repeatedly through your willingness to keep trying after failure, to keep hoping after disappointment, to keep loving after betrayal, to keep living after loss. It's demonstrated not by your ability to avoid pain, but by your capacity to survive it, integrate it, and continue growing despite it. Resilience is not a fixed trait, but a developing capacity. Each challenge you navigate skillfully increases your confidence in your ability to handle future difficulties. Each recovery strengthens your trust in your own healing capacity. Each time you choose growth over safety, love over fear, hope over despair, you build the internal resources that will serve you when life presents its next inevitable challenge. The pain you've experienced, the struggles you've endured, the difficulties you've navigated, these are not evidence of your inadequacy, but proof of your humanity. They connect you to the universal experience of being alive in a world that contains both suffering and joy, both loss and discovery, both endings and beginnings. Your pain doesn't define you, but your response to pain reveals who you are becoming. And who you are becoming is someone stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than who you were before the pain taught you what it came to teach. In the end, you are not your pain. You are what remains when the pain passes, what grows from the soil that suffering prepared, what emerges when the storm finally clears. You are the love that survives heartbreak, the hope that outlasts disappointment, the strength that develops through struggle, the wisdom that comes from walking through fire and discovering that you are made of something that cannot be burned. Even now, as you read these words, the sky is performing its ancient ritual of transformation. Somewhere, morning light is painting clouds in shades that have no names. Somewhere else, afternoon sun is casting shadows that will never exist in exactly this configuration again. And in yet another place, evening is arriving with its slow ceremony of colour, its gentle transition from day to night that happens with such reliability you could set your internal clock by its rhythm. This daily miracle continues regardless of your attention to it, regardless of whether anyone witnesses it, regardless of the troubles that occupy human minds, or the sorrows that fill human hearts. The sky doesn't pause its beauty because the world feels broken. The sunset doesn't dim its colours because you're having a difficult day. The dawn doesn't delay its arrival because you're not ready for new beginnings. The world's beauty operates on a different frequency than human suffering, not because it's indifferent to pain, but because it serves a different function. Beauty exists as a reminder, an anchor, a proof that there are forces at work in the universe that create rather than destroy, that build rather than tear down, that offer rather than take away. It's evidence that something in existence loves existence enough to make it gorgeous. The sky still changes colour every evening. This simple fact contains enormous comfort when you remember it. While everything else in your life may feel uncertain, unstable, or unpredictable, the sky continues its reliable dance of transformation. The light shifts from gold to rose to purple to deep blue with the same faithfulness it has shown for millions of years, will show for millions more. This constancy doesn't make the sky boring, it makes it trustworthy. You can count on beauty showing up, even when you can't count on much else. You can rely on the world to continue creating moments of visual poetry, even when human language fails to capture what needs to be said. You can depend on the evening sky to remind you that transitions can be graceful, that endings can be beautiful, that change can happen with dignity rather than violence. When your own life feels chaotic, the sky offers a different model of how to navigate transformation. It changes constantly, but never frantically. It responds to forces beyond its control, weather systems, seasonal shifts, the rotation of the planet. But it responds with such grace that the responding itself becomes the beauty. It shows you how to be flexible without being fragmented, how to change without losing your essential nature. There is music that can reach your soul. Somewhere in the vast catalogue of human creativity, there are combinations of sounds that speak directly to your particular nervous system, rhythms that match your internal tempo, melodies that give voice to feelings you didn't know you had words for. These songs exist whether you've found them yet or not, waiting in streaming services and record collections, in concert halls and street performances, in the humming of strangers and the singing of children. Music bypasses the rational mind and communicates directly with the emotional and spiritual centres of your being. It can shift your mood in moments, transport you to different times and places, connect you to experiences and emotions that feel larger than your individual life. It can make you feel less alone by giving you proof that someone else has felt exactly what you feel, has found a way to transform that feeling into something that others can share. The existence of music that moves you deeply is evidence that the world contains precisely the medicine your soul needs, even when you don't know you need it. It proves that human creativity is vast enough to include exactly the combinations of beauty that will speak to your particular form of consciousness. It suggests that the universe is arranged in such a way that what heals you has already been created. You need only to discover it. When you find music that reaches you, you're not just finding entertainment, you're finding evidence that you're understood, that your inner experience has been translated into a form that others can share, that your personal emotional reality is connected to something universal and beautiful. This connection reminds you that your feelings, however private or strange they may seem, are part of the larger symphony of human experience. Strangers still show kindness. Every day, in countless small ways, people who owe you nothing offer you something anyway. They hold doors, yield parking spaces, offer directions, share smiles, make room on crowded sidewalks. They donate to causes they'll never directly benefit from, volunteer for organisations that serve people they'll never meet, give money to individuals whose stories they'll never fully know. This daily flow of generosity often goes unnoticed because it's so common, so ordinary, so woven into the fabric of normal human interaction that it becomes invisible. But its invisibility doesn't diminish its reality or its significance. Every act of unpaid kindness is evidence that something in human nature wants to give rather than take, wants to help rather than harm, wants to connect rather than isolate. The stranger who helps you carry something heavy up the stairs doesn't know your story, doesn't know what you're going through, doesn't know whether you deserve assistance. They help because something in them recognizes something in you. A fellow human being navigating the challenge of being alive in a body, trying to get through the day with some dignity and tact. This recognition creates spontaneous compassion that requires no justification beyond shared humanity. When you notice the kindness of strangers, you remember that most people are fundamentally decent, that the world contains far more helpfulness than harm, that the default human response to witnessing struggle is often to try to help rather than to take advantage. This doesn't mean being naive about genuine dangers or ignoring real threats. It means remembering that kindness is more common than cruelty. Even when cruelty gets more attention, the earth keeps blooming. Despite pollution, climate change, deforestation, and countless human assaults on natural systems, something in nature continues its ancient commitment to growth, beauty, and renewal. Seeds still germinate in sidewalk cracks, flowers still push through concrete, trees still leaf out in spring with the same enthusiasm they've shown for millennia. This persistence of natural beauty is not naive optimism. It's biological programming that runs deeper than human interference. Life wants to live. Beauty wants to emerge. Growth wants to happen. These forces are so fundamental to existence that they continue operating even under adverse conditions, adapting to challenges, finding ways to flourish despite obstacles. When you notice a plant thriving in an unlikely place, growing through a fence, blooming in a vacant lot, reaching toward light in a narrow alley, you're witnessing the same force that wants to thrive in you, the same energy that seeks to create beauty from whatever conditions it encounters. Nature's persistence reminds you that the impulse toward growth and beauty is stronger than the forces that try to suppress it. The Earth's continued blooming offers hope not because it guarantees that everything will be fine, but because it demonstrates that life has tremendous resilience, creativity, and determination to continue creating beauty regardless of circumstances. It shows you that the same creative force that pushes flowers through pavement is available to you when you need to find ways to bloom despite difficult conditions. Wonder hasn't left, we've just stopped noticing. The capacity for awe, amazement, and delighted surprise that you experienced so easily as a child hasn't disappeared. It's been buried under layers of familiarity, routine, and the adult habit of knowing rather than discovering. But wonder is always available, always renewable, always ready to transform ordinary moments into experiences of profound beauty and meaning. Wonder lives in the recognition that you don't actually understand how most things work. You don't understand how your thoughts arise, how your heart knows to beat, how your eyes translate light into vision, how your food becomes energy, how your body heals its own wounds. You don't understand how plants know when to bloom, how birds navigate thousands of miles, how the internet actually functions, how music can move you to tears. This not knowing is not ignorance. It's the foundation of wonder. When you remember how much you don't understand, the world becomes mysterious again. When you acknowledge how many everyday miracles you take for granted, ordinary experience becomes extraordinary. When you recognize how little you actually comprehend about existence, everything becomes worthy of amazement. Cultivating wonder doesn't require dramatic experiences or exotic locations. It requires only the willingness to see familiar things with fresh eyes, to approach routine experiences with curiosity rather than assumption, to ask questions that have no easy answers. It means remembering that you live in a universe so vast and complex that your understanding of it will always be partial, provisional, and open to surprise. A single sentence can change a life. Words have the power to shift entire worldviews, to plant seeds that grow into new ways of thinking, to offer exactly the perspective someone needs to understand their situation differently. The sentence that changes your life might come from a book, a conversation, a song, a movie, or a stranger's casual comment that happens to reach you at exactly the right moment. You may never know when you've spoken the sentence that changes someone else's life. The encouragement you offer to someone who's doubting themselves, the perspective you share during someone's confusion, the simple acknowledgement of someone's worth during their season of feeling invisible. These words might be exactly what they need to keep going, to try again, to believe in themselves, to choose hope over despair. The power of language to transform experience is one of the most accessible forms of magic available to humans. Words can reframe situations, offer new possibilities, provide comfort, inspire action, and create connection across the barriers of individual experience. They can make someone feel seen, understood, valued, and supported in ways that change how they see themselves and what they believe is possible. This doesn't mean that all words have equal power, or that positive thinking alone can solve serious problems. It means that language, wielded with care and wisdom, can be a tool for healing, growth, and transformation. It means that the words you speak and write matter more than you might realize, that they carry the potential to influence lives in ways you may never discover. Hope doesn't need to be loud. The hope that sustains you through difficulty often whispers rather than shouts, appears in quiet moments rather than dramatic revelations, emerges through small signs rather than overwhelming evidence. It might be as subtle as noticing that you're still curious about something, still interested in trying again, still able to imagine that things could be different. Quiet hope is often more sustainable than dramatic hope, because it doesn't depend on external circumstances to maintain itself. It doesn't require proof that everything will work out perfectly. It requires only the recognition that you've survived difficulties before, that you have resources you haven't fully discovered yet, that the future remains unwritten and therefore open to possibility. This subtle hope often appears as persistence rather than optimism, as willingness rather than confidence, as openness rather than certainty. It's the part of you that keeps taking next steps even when you can't see the destination, that keeps planting seeds even when you can't guarantee the harvest, that keeps showing up even when you don't know what will come of your showing up. Loud hope demands immediate results and loses faith when they don't appear. Quiet hope trusts the process even when the outcome is uncertain. It's hope that has been tested by reality and found sustainable. Hope that has learned to thrive on possibility rather than promise. Hope that can coexist with uncertainty without being destroyed by it. Magic still exists in small, strange places. It lives in the moment when you're thinking of someone and they call unexpectedly. It appears in the book that falls off the shelf and opens to exactly the page you need to read. It manifests in the series of coincidences that lead you to exactly the right place, at exactly the right time to meet exactly the person who has what you need. This magic doesn't violate the laws of physics or require supernatural explanations. It's the magic of synchronicity, of meaningful coincidence, of the mysterious ways that consciousness and circumstance seem to collaborate when you're paying attention. It's evidence that the world is more interconnected, more responsive, more alive than mechanical worldviews suggest. When you remain open to this small magic, you begin to notice it everywhere. The parking space that opens up just when you need it. The song on the radio that perfectly captures your mood. The conversation that happens to address exactly the question you've been asking. The solution that appears just when you've stopped looking for it. Recognizing this magic doesn't mean becoming superstitious or abandoning critical thinking. It means remaining open to the possibility that life contains more mystery and meaning than purely rational explanations can account for. It means allowing yourself to be delighted by coincidences rather than dismissing them, to find meaning in synchronicities rather than explaining them away. Nature heals, even without asking. Time spent in natural settings reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, improves mood, and enhances immune function through mechanisms that scientists are still discovering. Your nervous system recognizes its kinship with natural rhythms, its need for the kind of space and silence that only nature provides, its hunger for the particular quality of beauty that emerges from uncontrolled growth and wild organization. This healing happens automatically when you spend time outdoors, when you watch water move, when you feel wind on your skin, when you listen to birds or observe the intricate patterns that appear in everything from tree bark to cloud formations. You don't have to believe in nature's healing power for it to work. It works because you're part of nature, because your system recognizes its source and relaxes into belonging. Even small doses of nature contact, looking at trees through a window, caring for houseplants, spending time with animals, listening to recordings of natural sounds, can provide measurable benefits. Your body knows it belongs to the natural world even when your mind is focused on artificial environments, electronic devices, and human-created problems. When you remember your fundamental connection to the natural world, when you take time to simply be present with non-human life, when you allow yourself to receive the healing that nature offers freely, you reconnect with resources for well-being that don't depend on human systems, economic conditions, or social approval. You remember that you're supported by forces larger and older than your personal struggles. Beauty exists whether or not you're looking. This truth contains profound comfort for the moments when you're too tired, too sad, or too overwhelmed to notice the loveliness that surrounds you. The sunset still happens even when you're too busy to watch it. The flowers still bloom even when you're too distracted to see them. The music still plays even when you're too stressed to listen. Beauty doesn't require your attention to justify its existence. It doesn't need your appreciation to validate its worth. It simply is, offering itself freely to anyone who has the time and space to receive it, but continuing to exist even when no one is available to receive what it offers. This independence of beauty from human perception means that the world continues to create gorgeous moments even during your difficult seasons, continues to offer visual poetry even when you're too overwhelmed to read it, continues to provide aesthetic nourishment even when you're too hungry for other things to notice. Beauty waits patiently for your return without diminishing in your absence. When you do return your attention to beauty, when you finally have the space to notice the light, to hear the music, to see the colours, it's always there, as generous and available as ever. Beauty doesn't punish your inattention with absence. It welcomes your return with the same abundance it offered before you looked away, the same grace it will offer when you look away again. The world's beauty is not dependent on your personal circumstances, your emotional state, or your capacity to appreciate it in any given moment. It's a gift that keeps giving regardless of whether anyone is ready to receive it. A constant offering that transforms ordinary moments into experiences of grace. For anyone who remembers to pay attention, a reliable source of wonder that operates independently of human drama while remaining perpetually available to heal, inspire, and remind you that existence itself is an act of love. In a world that often feels broken, beauty is the proof that something in the universe continues to create rather than destroy, to build rather than tear down, to offer rather than withhold. It's evidence that you live in a reality that wants to be wonderful, that works constantly to become more beautiful, that offers healing and hope and wonder to anyone willing to slow down enough to notice what's always been here, waiting patiently for your return. The voice that tells you to hurry is not the voice of wisdom. It's the voice of a culture that has confused speed with efficiency, motion with progress, constant activity with meaningful accomplishment. It's the voice that measures your worth by your productivity, your value by your pace, your success by how quickly you can move from one thing to the next, without pausing to consider whether any of it actually matters to the person you're becoming. But time is not your enemy. The clock that seems to tick so relentlessly, measuring out moments like a miser counting coins, is actually neutral. A simple tool for coordination and measurement that has no opinion about how you should spend your days. The pressure you feel to move faster, achieve more, optimize every moment comes not from time itself, but from stories you've been told about what time means and how it should be used. Time moves at exactly the right speed for life to unfold as it needs to unfold. Trees don't grow faster than their cellular structure can support. Babies don't develop faster than their nervous systems can handle. Seasons don't change more quickly than ecosystems can adapt. The universe operates according to its own rhythms, its own timelines, its own sense of appropriate pacing, and you are part of that universe, subject to those same natural laws of development and growth. You're allowed to pause. This permission sounds simple but feels revolutionary in a world that treats stopping as laziness, reflection as procrastination, rest as moral failure. You're allowed to sit with uncertainty instead of rushing toward premature answers. You're allowed to take time to feel your feelings instead of immediately trying to fix or change them. You're allowed to be still with questions that don't have easy solutions. Pausing is not the same as giving up. It's the difference between reactive rushing and responsive choosing, between panic and patience, between force and flow. When you pause, you create space for wisdom to emerge, for better options to reveal themselves, for your nervous system to settle enough that you can make decisions from clarity rather than anxiety. The pause is where insight lives. It's in the space between stimulus and response that you discover you have choices. It's in the gap between question and answer that understanding deepens. It's in the silence between notes that music finds its meaning. The things you discover when you slow down enough to notice them are often the things that matter most. The things that can't be found when you're moving too quickly to see them. There is no race. The competition that seems so urgent, so essential, so unavoidable is largely a construction of minds that have been trained to think in terms of winners and losers, first and last, ahead and behind. But life is not a contest with predetermined rules, clear finish lines and objective judges. It's an exploration with infinite possible paths, countless definitions of success, and deeply personal criteria for what constitutes a life well lived. When you stop racing against others, you can finally start walking with them. When you release the need to be first, you can enjoy the company of fellow travelers. When you quit comparing your progress to everyone else's, you can focus on whether you're moving in directions that align with your own values, interests, and sense of purpose. The race mentality creates artificial scarcity. The belief that there's only room for one winner, that someone else's success diminishes your opportunities, that you must choose between your own advancement and others' well-being. But abundance thinking recognizes that there are many ways to win, many definitions of success, many paths that lead to fulfillment and meaning. Slowness can be sacred. In spiritual traditions around the world, deliberate slowness is recognized as a pathway to deeper understanding, greater presence, and more profound connection with reality. Slow walking becomes meditation. Slow eating becomes mindfulness practice. Slow breathing becomes a bridge between conscious and unconscious, between mind and body, between individual self and larger existence. When you move slowly enough to pay attention, ordinary activities transform into opportunities for awareness. The simple act of preparing food becomes a practice of gratitude for the plants and animals that nourish you, the farmers who grew what you eat, the complex web of relationships that bring sustenance to your table. The basic process of getting dressed becomes a moment of appreciation for the body that carries you through your days, the hands that can manipulate fabric, the capacity to choose how you present yourself to the world. Sacred slowness is not about taking longer to do everything. It's about bringing quality of attention to whatever you're doing, whether it takes minutes or hours. It's about depth rather than duration, presence rather than pace. Some things require speed and efficiency. Others benefit from careful attention and unhurried consideration. Wisdom lies in knowing which is which. Life unfolds. You don't have to force it. The belief that you must make everything happen through willpower, effort, and constant action is one of the most exhausting lies of modern living. It treats life as a machine that responds only to force, rather than as an organic system that responds to both action and receptivity, both doing and allowing, both effort and ease. When you try to force life to conform to your timeline, your expectations, your plans, you often prevent the very outcomes you're trying to create. Force creates resistance. Pushing creates pushback. Demanding immediate results often delays the results you're demanding. The energy you spend trying to control timing is often energy that could be better spent preparing for opportunities when they naturally arise. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning all effort. It means learning to work with life's rhythms rather than against them, to plant seeds and tend them rather than demanding instant harvest, to prepare yourself for possibilities while remaining open to outcomes different from what you expected. Timing isn't everything. Trust is. The belief that everything depends on perfect timing creates enormous anxiety about missing opportunities, being too late, failing to act at precisely the right moment. But most opportunities are more forgiving than you think. Most windows stay open longer than they appear to. Most chances to grow, love, contribute, and connect are available across wider timeframes than the urgency in your mind suggests. What matters more than perfect timing is your readiness to recognize opportunities when they appear and your willingness to act when action is called for. This readiness comes not from constant vigilance, but from ongoing preparation, developing skills, clarifying values, cultivating relationships, maintaining health, and staying open to possibility. Trust in timing means believing that what's meant for you will find you, that opportunities aligned with your growth will appear when you're ready for them, that the people you're meant to meet will cross your path when the timing serves everyone involved. This trust doesn't eliminate the need for action. It reduces the anxiety that often prevents effective action. The best moments often arrive without warning. If you're constantly planning, scheduling, and organizing your life around anticipated experiences, you might miss the spontaneous moments of beauty, connection, and joy that arise in the spaces between your plans. The conversation that changes your perspective happens while you're waiting for the bus. The insight that solves your problem emerges while you're washing dishes. The moment of pure contentment arrives while you're doing nothing special at all. These unplanned moments often have more impact than the experiences you spend months organizing. They catch you off guard in the best possible way, arriving when your defenses are down and your expectations are relaxed. They remind you that life's greatest gifts often come as surprises rather than achievements, as grace rather than earnings, as discoveries rather than destinations. Being open to unexpected moments requires maintaining some flexibility in your schedule, some spaciousness in your planning, some availability for spontaneity. It means not filling every minute with predetermined activities, not scheduling yourself so tightly that there's no room for serendipity, not becoming so focused on your agenda that you miss what life is trying to give you. You're allowed to breathe. This simple permission contains profound medicine for nervous systems that have been trained to operate in constant states of urgency, vigilance, and preparedness for the next demand. Conscious breathing is like pressing a reset button for your entire system, reminding your body that you're safe in this moment, that you don't need to prepare for immediate action, that you can simply be present with the miracle of being alive. When you breathe slowly and deeply, you activate your parasympathetic nervous system. the part of your autonomic nervous system responsible for rest, repair, and restoration. You signal to your body that it's safe to relax, to digest, to heal, to regenerate. You remind yourself at the cellular level that life is sustainable, that you don't have to live in constant emergency mode, that there's time for your system to maintain itself. Breathing slowly also brings you into the present moment in a way that thinking cannot achieve. Your breath is always happening now, not in the past or future, but in this immediate moment. When you pay attention to breathing, you automatically return to present tense reality, to the only time when life actually occurs, when choices can be made, when peace can be experienced. Urgency isn't always truth. The feeling that everything must happen immediately, that decisions cannot wait, that action must be taken right now, is often more about internal anxiety than external reality. True urgency is rare. Most situations that feel urgent are actually important situations filtered through stress, fear, or conditioning that treats everything as an emergency. Learning to distinguish between genuine urgency and anxiety-driven rushing is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. Real urgency has a different quality than manufactured urgency. It's clear rather than frantic, focused rather than scattered, purposeful rather than compulsive. When something truly requires immediate attention, you feel energized and focused rather than panicked and overwhelmed. Most of the time, what feels urgent can actually wait long enough for you to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. The email doesn't need to be answered immediately. The decision doesn't need to be made today. The problem doesn't need to be solved right now. When you slow down enough to evaluate whether urgency is real or perceived, you often discover that you have more time than you thought, more options than you realized, more space to breathe than your initial reaction suggested. The now is more spacious than it feels. When you're rushing through life, the present moment feels cramped, insufficient, like a narrow hallway you must hurry through to reach some more important room. But when you slow down enough to inhabit the present fully, you discover that now is actually vast, large enough to contain all the awareness, presence, and attention you bring to it. This spaciousness of the present moment is not about duration, but about depth. A single, conscious breath can feel more satisfying than an entire day spent rushing from one activity to the next. A few minutes of genuine presence with someone you love can create more connection than hours of distracted time together. A moment of real appreciation for something beautiful can be more nourishing than an entire vacation spent documenting experiences without fully experiencing them. When you learn to inhabit the present moment fully rather than passing through it quickly, you discover that time becomes elastic, that moments can expand to hold everything you need them to hold. You realize that the richness of experience depends not on how much you pack into your time, but on how deeply you enter into whatever time you have. This doesn't mean that future planning is unimportant or that goals don't matter. It means that all planning and all goal achievement happens in the present moment, in the now where decisions are made, actions are taken, and life is actually lived. When you ground yourself fully in present moment awareness, your planning becomes more realistic, and your actions become more effective because they're based on clear perception of current reality rather than anxiety about imagined futures. The deepest satisfaction often comes not from reaching destinations, but from learning to travel well, not from achieving specific outcomes, but from engaging fully with whatever process you're involved in, not from speeding through experiences, but from savoring them as they unfold. When you stop rushing toward the next thing, you can finally enjoy this thing. When you stop trying to get somewhere else, you can appreciate where you are. When you stop racing against time, you can dance with it instead. Time is not running out, it's flowing through you. Every moment is a gift you receive and then release, a breath you inhale and then exhale, an experience you welcome and then let go. The fear that time is running out comes from trying to hold on to what is meant to flow, from attempting to possess what is meant to be experienced and released. When you align yourself with time's natural flow rather than fighting against it, when you learn to receive each moment fully and release it gracefully, When you stop trying to save time and start learning to spend it wisely, you discover a different relationship with temporal existence, one characterized by presence rather than pressure, gratitude rather than greed, flow rather than force. You have enough time for what matters. Not enough time for everything. Not enough time for all the things you think you should do. Not enough time for every opportunity or possibility. But enough time for what truly matters to you. What aligns with your deepest values. What serves your authentic growth and genuine contribution to the world. The shortage you feel is often not a shortage of time, but a shortage of clarity about priorities. A difficulty saying no to what doesn't matter, so you can say yes to what does. When you become clear about what you truly value, when you align your time with your actual priorities rather than other people's expectations, when you focus on essential rather than urgent, you often discover that you have more time than you thought. Not more hours in the day, but more meaning in the hours you have. This abundance of time for what matters doesn't come from better time management techniques or increased efficiency. It comes from better life management, from knowing yourself clearly enough to choose consciously, from valuing yourself enough to protect your time and energy, from loving yourself enough to spend your life on what will matter when you look back from your final moments. The invitation is to slow down enough to speed up, to rest enough to have real energy, to pause enough to move with purpose, to breathe enough to live fully. When you stop rushing through your life, you can finally start living it. When you release the urgency that isn't real, you can respond to the opportunities that are. When you quit racing against time, you can finally find your own rhythm and discover that your natural pace is exactly right for the life you're meant to live. The most invisible impact you have on the world is often the most profound. You exist in a web of influence so intricate and far-reaching that your mind cannot begin to track all the ways your presence changes everything around you. Every interaction you have sends ripples through networks of relationships that extend far beyond your awareness. Every choice you make contributes to patterns of possibility that shape futures you will never see. You move through the world like a stone thrown into still water, creating circles that expand outward in ways you rarely notice. The kind word you speak to someone who's having a difficult day might give them the strength to treat the next person they encounter with patience instead of irritation. The patience you show to a stressed clerk might be exactly what they need to remember their own humanity and extend grace to someone else. The smile you offer to a stranger might be the only genuine warmth they receive that day. You've already changed someone's life. This isn't hyperbole or wishful thinking. It's mathematical certainty. In the course of your existence, you have said things, done things, or simply been present in ways that altered someone else's trajectory. You've offered encouragement that kept someone going when they wanted to give up. You've provided an example that showed someone what was possible. You've created moments of beauty, kindness, or connection that someone carries with them as proof that good things still happen in the world. Most of the time, you don't know when you're changing a life. The moment feels ordinary to you. Just another conversation, just another day, just another small act of consideration or care. But for the other person, that moment might be the turning point, the inspiration, the reminder they needed to remember their own worth, to try again, to choose hope over despair. The teenager who decided not to end their life because a teacher noticed they seemed sad and took a moment to ask if they were okay. The person who went back to school because a casual conversation reminded them of dreams they'd abandoned. The individual who started creating art again because someone admired something they'd made and dismissed as unimportant. These transformations happen constantly, invisibly, through interactions that seem insignificant to those who initiate them, but prove life-altering to those who receive them. Your presence is a gift. This truth is difficult to accept because it doesn't depend on your accomplishments, your productivity, or your ability to provide something useful to others. Your presence is valuable simply because you exist, because consciousness expresses itself through your particular way of seeing, feeling, and responding to the world. Your specific combination of sensitivity, humor, perspective, and care has never existed before and will never exist again. When you're fully present with someone, when you listen without planning your response, when you pay attention without agenda, When you offer your genuine availability to whatever they're experiencing, you provide something that's increasingly rare in a distracted world. You create space for them to be themselves without performance, to feel heard without judgment, to experience the profound comfort of being witnessed by another human being. This gift of presence doesn't require special skills or extensive training. It requires only the willingness to set aside your own preoccupations long enough to be genuinely available to someone else's experience. It's about quality of attention rather than quantity of time, depth of listening rather than brilliance of response, authenticity of care rather than perfection of understanding. You make more of a difference than you know. The impact you have on others often operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, both yours and theirs. The way you treat service workers affects how they feel about themselves and how they treat their families when they go home. The patience you show when someone is learning something new encourages them to keep trying. The respect you demonstrate for people who are different from you contributes to a culture of acceptance and inclusion. Your influence extends through networks of relationship in ways that create exponential impact. The kindness you show to one person affects how they treat others, which affects how those others treat still others, creating chains of positive influence that can extend across continents and generations. The values you embody through your choices provide examples that others can follow, even when they don't consciously recognize you as an influence. Sometimes your greatest impact comes not from what you do, but from what you refuse to do. When you decline to participate in gossip, you help protect someone's reputation. When you refuse to laugh at humor that demeans others, you create space for respect. When you choose not to respond to hostility with hostility, you help break cycles of conflict and retaliation. Just being here counts. Your existence matters independent of any specific contribution you make, any particular problem you solve, any measurable difference you create. The universe somehow arranged itself so that you could exist, so that consciousness could experience itself through your particular nervous system, so that life could explore what it means to be alive through your specific way of being human. This mattering is not something you need to earn through achievement or maintain through performance. It's woven into the fabric of your existence, as fundamental as your heartbeat, as basic as your breathing. You matter because you're here, because you're conscious, because you're part of the ongoing experiment of existence exploring itself through countless individual forms. The people who love you know this truth even when you forget it. They value your existence for reasons that have nothing to do with what you accomplish or provide. They appreciate your laughter, your perspective, your way of seeing the world. They're grateful for your presence in their lives, not because of what you do for them, but because of who you are when you're being yourself. Someone smiles because of you. Somewhere in your sphere of influence, someone experiences moments of joy, amusement, or simple happiness because of something you said, did, or are. Your sense of humor brings lightness to situations that feel heavy. Your enthusiasm for things you love is contagious, helping others remember what it feels like to care deeply about something. Your genuine interest in others makes them feel valued and interesting. These moments of joy you create might seem small to you, but they're often exactly what someone needs to remember, that life contains pleasure as well as pain, beauty as well as struggle, reasons to smile as well as reasons to worry. In a world that can feel overwhelmingly serious, your ability to find humor, create lightness, or simply enjoy being alive provides essential medicine for hearts that have forgotten how to be happy. The smiles you inspire often happen when you're not looking, when your natural way of being in the world creates moments of delight for people who happen to be paying attention. The child who laughs at your silly face in the grocery store, the friend who feels better after talking with you, even when you didn't give advice, the stranger who feels more hopeful about humanity after witnessing your kindness to someone else. You don't need to be big to matter. The belief that significance requires scale, that importance depends on visibility, that value must be measurable, is one of the most limiting myths of modern culture. It makes people feel insignificant unless they're famous, unimportant unless they're influencing thousands, valueless unless they're creating dramatic change on a large scale. But most of the things that make life worth living happen on a small scale, in families and friendships, in communities and neighborhoods, in the daily interactions between individuals who will never be famous but whose care for each other creates the foundation of human flourishing. The teacher who inspires a love of learning in their students, the parent who provides security for their children, the friend who can be counted on during difficult times, the neighbour who checks on elderly residents, the worker who takes pride in doing their job well. These contributions may not make headlines or generate social media attention, but they create the actual texture of human experience. They're the substance from which meaningful life is built, the evidence that love exists and expresses itself through countless small acts of care, attention, and consideration. Your quiet strength has power. Strength doesn't always announce itself with drama or demonstrate itself through dominance. Often the most profound strength is quiet. The strength to keep going when everything feels difficult, to remain kind when others are cruel, to maintain hope when circumstances seem hopeless, to continue loving when love has been met with rejection or indifference. This quiet strength provides stability for others who are struggling, proof that it's possible to endure difficulty with dignity, evidence that resilience doesn't require hardness or cynicism. When people see you navigating challenges with grace, when they witness your ability to remain centered during chaos, when they observe your commitment to your values despite external pressures, they remember their own capacity for strength. Your quiet strength often operates as a form of leadership that doesn't require titles or formal authority. People naturally gravitate toward those who seem genuinely grounded, who embody the qualities they aspire to develop in themselves, who demonstrate through their presence that it's possible to be both strong and gentle, both realistic and hopeful, both independent and connected. You've done things no one else could do. This isn't about dramatic achievements or unique talents. It's about the fact that no one else could have lived your life, made your specific choices, learned your particular lessons, or developed your individual perspective. The combination of experiences, relationships, and circumstances that have shaped you is entirely unique, creating capacities and insights that belong only to you. The comfort you've offered to people who are suffering drew from your own experience with pain in ways that someone who hadn't faced similar challenges couldn't provide. The solutions you found to problems came from your particular way of thinking and seeing that someone else might never discover. The connections you've made between ideas, people, or possibilities is merged from your unique vantage point in the world. Even your mistakes and failures have contributed to outcomes that couldn't have happened any other way. The wrong turn that led you to meet someone important, the failure that forced you to develop new skills, the disappointment that redirected you towards something better, suited to your nature, these experiences, uniquely yours, created ripple effects that only you could create. The world is better with you in it. This truth encompasses all the visible and invisible ways your presence contributes to the whole, all the known and unknown ways your existence creates value, adds beauty, provides care, offers hope, or simply increases the total amount of consciousness and love in the universe. Your existence adds something to the world that didn't exist before you were born and won't exist after you're gone. The particular way you notice beauty, the specific things that make you laugh, the unique combination of qualities that emerges when you're being fully yourself. These contribute to the richness of human experience in ways that can't be measured, but are nonetheless real and valuable. The world needs your perspective, your questions, your way of caring about things that others might overlook. It needs your particular form of sensitivity, your specific sense of humour, your individual approach to problem solving. It needs the stories only you can tell, the connections only you can make, the love only you can offer in the particular way you offer it. You're not invisible. Even when you feel unseen, unnoticed, or overlooked, you're perceived and appreciated by people in ways you might never discover. The shy person who finds courage in your example, the overwhelmed parent who feels less alone because of your understanding, the struggling student who feels smarter because of your patience, the lonely individual who feels more connected because of your friendship. Your visibility doesn't depend on fame, recognition, or external validation. You become visible every time you show up authentically, every time you express genuine care, every time you offer your real self instead of a performed version designed to impress others. This kind of visibility creates real connection rather than superficial attention, lasting impact rather than temporary recognition. The people who truly see you appreciate not just what you accomplish, but who you are when you're not trying to accomplish anything. They notice your kindness when you think no one is watching, your integrity when it would be easier to compromise, your commitment to growth even when progress is slow. This kind of seeing and being seen is far more valuable than any form of public recognition. Your mattering is not contingent on external circumstances, other people's recognition, or measurable outcomes. It's built into the structure of your existence, woven into your participation in the web of relationships that connects all life, embedded in your capacity to love, learn, grow, and contribute to the ongoing creation of the world. When you remember that you matter, not because of what you achieve, but because of who you are, not because of your productivity, but because of your presence, not because of your perfection, but because of your participation in the beautiful, difficult, essential work of being human, you can stop trying to prove your worth and start expressing it. You can stop earning your place and start inhabiting it. You can stop waiting for permission to matter and start recognizing that your mattering is not a question requiring an answer, but a truth requiring acknowledgement. The evidence of your mattering surrounds you constantly, in the relationships you've built, the lives you've touched, the love you've given and received, the moments of beauty you've created or witnessed, the simple fact that you're here, reading these words, participating in the miraculous ongoing experiment of consciousness, exploring itself through the infinite varieties of human experience. You matter. This is not a hope or a wish or a comforting fiction. This is a fact as solid as the ground beneath your feet, as reliable as the rhythm of your heart, as true today as it was the moment you first drew breath, and will remain true until you release your final exhale. Your mattering is not up for debate, subject to revision, or dependent on proof. It simply is, and in its simple being, it makes everything else possible. After all the heartbreak, all the disappointment, all the times love has felt more like a beautiful lie than a reliable truth, something in you still recognizes love when it appears. Despite every reason to become cynical, despite every evidence that caring leads to hurt, despite every argument that vulnerability is dangerous and trust is naive, your heart still knows the difference between what's real and what's performance, still responds to genuine care like a flower turning toward light. Love has survived every attempt to commercialize it, commodify it, reduce it to chemistry or psychology or evolutionary strategy. It has outlasted every cynic who declared it an illusion, every scientist who tried to explain it away, every philosopher who argued it was projection. Love remains as mysterious and essential as it was in the first moment one conscious being recognized another and felt the inexplicable urge to care about their well-being more than their own. Real love is never wasted. Every moment you have spent loving someone, regardless of whether that love was returned, whether the relationship lasted, whether the ending was gentle or devastating, has contributed to your capacity to love more deeply, more wisely, more skillfully. Love doesn't disappear when relationships end. It transforms, teaching you about your own heart's resilience, showing you depths of feeling you didn't know you possessed, preparing you for future love with greater awareness of both its possibilities and its challenges. The love you gave to someone who couldn't receive it fully wasn't lost. It expanded your understanding of what it means to care without condition, to offer your heart without guarantee, to value someone's well-being even when they couldn't value yours. The love you received from someone who later left taught you that you are worthy of care, that your presence can bring joy to others, that connection is possible even when it's temporary. Every experience of loving contributes to a cumulative wisdom about the nature of connection, the complexity of human hearts, the courage required to remain open despite the certainty of eventual loss. This wisdom doesn't protect you from future heartbreak, but it helps you navigate love with greater skill, deeper appreciation, and more realistic expectations. You are worthy of tenderness. This truth stands independent of your achievements, your appearance, your ability to meet others' expectations, or your capacity to provide something useful in return. Your worthiness of gentle care, patient understanding, and loving attention is built into your humanity, as fundamental as your need for air, food, and shelter. Tenderness is not something you earn through good behaviour or lose through mistakes. It's not a reward for perfection, or a privilege reserved for those who never cause problems. Tenderness is the natural response of love to the recognition that consciousness is fragile, that being human is difficult, that everyone is doing their best with resources that sometimes feel inadequate to the challenges they face. When someone offers you tenderness, when they speak gently to you when you're struggling, when they touch you with care when you're hurting, when they hold space for your confusion without trying to fix it, they're responding to something essential in you that exists independent of your circumstances, your performance, or your current emotional state. They're seeing the part of you that remains innocent despite experience, vulnerable despite strength, worthy of care despite imperfection. The right people love you as you are, not as you might become with enough improvement, not as you appear when you're performing your best self, not as you could be if you fixed everything about yourself that seems broken or insufficient. The people who are right for your life love the person you are right now, in this moment, with all your quirks and limitations and areas of ongoing growth. This doesn't mean that people who love you don't see your flaws or aren't aware of ways you could grow and change. It means they love you including your imperfections rather than despite them, that they see your limitations as part of your humanity rather than as obstacles to their care, that they appreciate your authenticity more than they would value your perfection. The right people don't love you conditionally, waiting for you to become worthy of their care. They don't offer affection as a reward for meeting their expectations, or withdraw it as punishment for disappointing them. They love you the way you love a sunset, not because it earns their appreciation, but because its beauty moves them, not because it tries to please them, but because it exists in its own magnificent way. Love can begin again. No matter how many times your heart has been broken, no matter how thoroughly you've convinced yourself that you're done with love, no matter how much evidence you've accumulated that caring leads to pain, your capacity for connection remains intact. The heart that has loved before can love again, not because previous love was inadequate, but because love is renewable, inexhaustible, always available for new expression. Beginning again doesn't mean forgetting what you've learned from previous experiences of love. It means bringing the wisdom earned through past relationships to new connections, using what you've discovered about yourself and others to love more skillfully, more authentically, more consciously. It means approaching new love with both the innocence that allows for surprise and the experience that provides better judgment. Each new experience of love is completely unique, requiring its own discoveries, creating its own patterns, offering its own lessons. The love you shared with one person doesn't limit or define the love you might share with another. Your heart is not a finite resource that diminishes with use. It's a capacity that expands with exercise, deepens with experience, grows stronger through both joy and heartbreak. You're not too broken to be loved. The parts of yourself that feel damaged, the aspects of your personality that seem difficult, the areas where you still struggle with healing and growth, these don't disqualify you from receiving love. They make you human, which is the only qualification required for being worthy of care, understanding, and acceptance. The belief that you must be whole before you can be loved keeps many people isolated during the very times when connection could help them heal. But love doesn't require perfection. It thrives on authenticity. The people who can love you while you're still figuring yourself out, who can appreciate your efforts to grow even when progress is slow, who can see your essential goodness even when you can't see it yourself. These are the people who offer real love rather than conditional approval. Your brokenness often becomes the source of your greatest capacity for compassion, understanding, and connection with others who struggle. The places where you've been hurt are the places where you can most authentically reach others who hurt in similar ways. Your healing becomes a gift not just to yourself, but to everyone who needs to see that recovery is possible, that growth can emerge from pain, that love can exist even in the midst of ongoing challenges. There is more love waiting for you. The love you've experienced so far in friendships, family relationships, romantic connections, or moments of unexpected kindness from strangers, represents only a fraction of the love that's available to you throughout your lifetime. Future relationships will offer different kinds of connection, new ways of caring and being cared for, fresh opportunities to both give and receive love. This waiting love doesn't all come in romantic form. It includes the friendships that will develop when you meet people who share your interests, understand your perspective, or simply enjoy your company. It encompasses the family-like bonds that can form with chosen people who become central to your life. It involves the mentoring relationships where you'll both learn from others and eventually guide those who come after you. The love that waits for you is not limited by your current circumstances, your past experiences, or your present ability to imagine how connection might unfold. It exists in potential, ready to manifest when timing, readiness, and opportunity align. Your job is not to force this love into existence, but to remain open to it when it appears, to recognize it when it arrives, to receive it when it's offered. Love outlasts time. The love that matters, the deep, authentic, transformative love that changes who you are and how you see the world, doesn't end when physical presence ends. It becomes part of your internal landscape, informing how you understand yourself, shaping how you relate to others, influencing the kind of person you continue to become. The people who have loved you deeply remain with you in ways that transcend physical proximity. Their influence shows up in the values they helped you develop, the confidence they gave you in your own worth, the perspective they shared that expanded your understanding of what's possible. They live in the habits you learned from them, the phrases you caught yourself using that came from them, the way you love others that reflects how they loved you. Even when relationships end, even when people die, even when circumstances separate you from those who mattered most, the love you shared continues to work in your life. It becomes a resource you can draw from during difficult times, a reminder of your capacity for deep connection, evidence that meaningful relationships are possible and worth the vulnerability they require. Some people stay even after they leave. This paradox captures the way that significant relationships continue to influence your life long after the person has physically departed. Their presence becomes internal rather than external, spiritual rather than physical, influential rather than immediate. You carry them with you in the way you approach challenges they helped you learn to navigate, in the dreams they encouraged you to pursue, in the self-compassion they taught you to practice. They accompany you through the choices they helped you learn to make, the boundaries they supported you in setting, the self-respect they helped you develop. This continued presence doesn't mean living in the past or refusing to form new relationships. It means allowing the love you've received to become part of your ongoing capacity to love and be loved, letting the gifts you've been given become resources for your continued growth and contribution to others' lives. You are capable of loving well. Despite every mistake you've made in relationships, every time you've hurt someone you cared about, every moment when you've fallen short of your own standards for how love should be expressed, you possess the fundamental capacity to love skillfully, generously, and wisely. This capacity doesn't depend on natural talent or perfect training. It develops through practice, through attention, through the willingness to learn from both your successes and your failures in love. Every relationship teaches you something about how to care more effectively, how to communicate more clearly, how to balance your own needs with consideration for others. Loving well means learning to love with both passion and patience, both enthusiasm and wisdom, both openness and appropriate boundaries. It means developing the ability to see others clearly, appreciating their gifts while acknowledging their limitations, supporting their growth while accepting their current reality, caring for their well-being while respecting their autonomy. The skills of loving well can be developed at any age, in any circumstances, regardless of your relationship history. They include learning to listen deeply, speak honestly, forgive gracefully, and maintain your own well-being while caring for others. They involve developing emotional intelligence, communication skills, and the capacity to remain centered and loving, even when relationships become challenging. Love is the one thing we carry with us, always. Through every change of circumstance, every transition between life stages, every loss and gain and transformation, Love remains as the constant thread that gives meaning to experience, purpose to growth, and connection to others who share the journey of being human. This isn't romantic sentimentality. It's recognition of love as the fundamental force that drives consciousness toward connection, that motivates beings to care for one another, that creates the conditions within which growth, healing, and flourishing become possible. Love is what makes you reach toward others despite the risk of rejection, what helps you persist through difficulties in relationships, what gives you the courage to remain vulnerable despite experience with heartbreak. Even in your most isolated moments, even when love feels absent from your immediate experience, you carry with you all the love you've ever received and given. It lives in your cellular memory, in your learned capacity for empathy, in your instinctive recognition of what care looks like when you encounter it. This accumulated love becomes a resource you can draw from and a gift you can offer, ensuring that love continues to flow through your life even when its current expressions are not what you hoped they would be. The love you carry is not just personal, it connects you to the universal human experience of caring and being cared for, of recognizing kinship with others who share the vulnerability and beauty of conscious existence. It links you to everyone who has ever loved, who loves now, who will love in the future, making you part of an endless community of hearts that have discovered that love is not just an emotion, but a way of being. Not just a feeling, but a force. Not just an experience, but the very essence of what makes existence meaningful. In the end, love is the most reliable truth in an uncertain world, the most renewable resource in a universe of scarcity, the most powerful force in a reality that often feels chaotic and uncontrollable. Love is what brought you into existence, what sustains you through difficulties, what connects you to others, what gives your life meaning, and what will remain when everything else has passed away. Love is still real, despite everything that argues against it, everything that seems to contradict it, everything that makes it seem naive or impossible, or too good to be true. Love persists as the foundation of all that matters, the source of all that heals, the reason for all that hopes. It waits for you in every moment of genuine connection, in every act of authentic care, in every recognition of shared humanity, in every choice to remain open despite the risk, to trust despite the uncertainty, to hope despite the evidence that love, like everything beautiful and essential and true, requires nothing from you except the willingness to remember what your heart has always known. That love is real, love is available, love is renewable, and love is always, ultimately, enough.